Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. It is Monday morning, 7 a.m. We're here every week, Sam. Today, Week 7 NFL review.
We are indeed.
We're here every week.
Every week.
It's about the time of year where you start to get a little grumpy.
I'm not grumpy today as much as in tremendous pain, Ted.
Oh.
It's a Father Ted reference for anyone out there.
Gotcha.
I woke up feeling like I played yesterday, not watched yesterday.
It was a long day. I mean, you were just 9:30 to midnight. Right?
I mean, I texted you yesterday that I woke up yesterday with a crick in my neck. Well, it's worse today, and the pull-ups from Friday have shredded my AC joint. So 2/3 of my upper body is just not functioning this morning.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you're old.
You watch Aaron Rodgers play every week as a 40-year-old, and every hit, it's like, oh, man, this one looks like it hurts a little bit more than the last one.
Right.
I mean, that's what happens when you're in your 40s like us.
So me and Rodgers, I'm guessing, feel about the same this morning.
Same. Probably absolutely the same because, you did some pull-ups.
Right.
Yeah. I moved some chairs a few weeks ago that set me back a day.
Right.
Moving some chairs.
Did some pull-ups on Friday and then woke up yesterday.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that have injured me.
Well, best of luck. We're going to try to grind through 2 hours and 45 minutes here. See if you could do it. Let me know if you need to tag out or something.
No, I'll be good. It's just that there might be an occasional yelp of pain.
Perfect.
From when I just look in this direction and my neck decides to go, nope, no, can't do that anymore.
Well, let's get into it. We got a lot to discuss here this week. Shout out to our friends over at Prize Picks, bringing it all to you right here on Check the Mic. Of course, you could download the Prize Picks app. Use our code Check the Mic. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. First time my lineup wasn't good.
Mine's still alive, right? Assuming I got the Jaden Daniels injury protection.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
I've been listening to the terms and conditions, and he left the game in the first half and did not return in the second.
And he was one of your four
which means
players.
He's rebooted.
And you would have Mark Andrews?
Yeah, still
in the lineup tonight. Well, that's good. You could have your first winning lineup here tonight. So check it out. All right, we're going to touch on Thursday night. There's some games that need a little more love than others, and there's some big news happening here. But let's start with Thursday night football. This one should be quick. Probably the worst Thursday night football game of the year. Denver Broncos 33, New Orleans Saints 10. Saints lose their fifth straight. Spencer Rattler had his second start. Bo Nix on the other side for the Broncos. Poor Saints, man. They were already missing 9 out of 11 opening day starters on offense. Then their defense started falling apart. Paulson Adebo broken femur?
Yeah.
Don't see that often.
Which also, did you see the video of that?
I didn't want to go back. There's been too many broken bones lately. I didn't want to watch the videos.
It was one where it seemed to buckle before he got to the contact. It's a little weird because it's slowed down tape, et cetera, et cetera. But again, the Twitter doctors, it looked like his leg had buckled on him before he got hit. It was a strange hit. You don't normally see a femur getting broken. Because that's the giant thigh bone. It's one of the strongest bones in your body. And it kind of looked like his leg had already buckled on him by the time he got hit anyway.
Right. Yeah, it was ugly. Marshawn Lattimore left with an injury. The Saints just had all sorts of injuries. And the Broncos really controlled the game. It could have been a lot worse. I thought Bo Nix missed a couple wide open throws.
Certainly in the first half.
At the beginning, he settled in a little bit. But it was the third straight game. The Saints were absolutely run over. The defense looked nothing like they did earlier in the season. So a lot of concerns for New Orleans, and the Broncos moved to 4-3 here.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying yesterday, this feels like the most injury-ravaged year in a long time. I don't think it actually is, sort of statistically.
I feel like we say this every year.
But I think it's the players that are getting hurt are all starters. That might be a difference that I think, somebody could check out. But so many starting caliber, big-name players are getting hurt. I mean, obviously the 49ers, teams like that, but the Saints have just been absolutely wrecked. I mean, they were going into this game with Spencer Rattler playing, an offensive line that had been banged up, and none of his receivers playing. You're like, okay, just the billing for this game. Spencer Rattler, Bo Nix, all the receivers out, offensive lines in tatters. This had Thursday night slop written all over it.
It lived up to it. It lived up to the hype.
Exactly. And anyone that was waiting for a return to the old Thursday night throwback games that were just miserable, this had that written all over it, telegraphed going into the game, and it did pretty much live up to it.
I don't have much else on this.
No, I mean, Spencer Rattler is going to end up with a performance that didn't look good, that didn't produce particularly well, that had a bunch of sort of turnover-worthy plays in it, and yet I still think there were signs of encouragement from him It's just that they got buried in the no hope that is you have no receivers, you've got no run game, you got no offensive line. It's not going to go well.
On the other side, you had the Bo Nix more than his rushing projection.
Oh yeah,
and
easy.
Got that pretty easily. He also had a 32-yarder on a QB sweep. Not only is he scrambling around like a madman, they are using him in the design run game now a little bit as well. So Bo Nix finished with 75 yards on the ground, and our guy Troy Franklin had 5 catches for 50 yards, featuring him a little bit more than they have,
which I think
in the past
is almost exactly what I projected. You were like, "Oh, he's going to go for $150." I was like, "No, come on. Look at the graph, right? That's too soon. 2 or 3 weeks from now, he's going to go off for $150."
Yeah, I said 4 catches, $150, 2 touchdowns. Now, to be fair, the one pass that Bo Nix missed in between 2 open receivers was a 50-yard touchdown to Troy Franklin if he chose to miss him instead of the crosser.
That's part of the calculation. You got to project that.
Oh, my bad.
So I said it was going to be 5 catches for 50, 60 yards. That's where he ended up.
Oh, wow.
Now, a couple of weeks, you're going to end up with $150.
Okay, $150. Okay, I'll be patient for Troy.
Yeah.
I got no more use for that game. Let's go to London yesterday. The Jacksonville Jaguars pick up their second win. They're 2-5, 32-16 over the New England Patriots. Patriots got up quickly, 10-0. Looked good early on. Drake May at the helm for his second start, 11-play, 68-yard drive to kick things off. But then the Jags settled in. Turning point in the game, the punt return for a touchdown, which was a big one.
Parker Washington.
96-yard. You don't see a whole lot of 96-yard punt returns. You're not even supposed to be returning punts inside the 10, and Parker Washington's returning one, 96 yards. That put the Jags up. Well, I was going to put them up 21-10. They got a penalty, go for the 2. They go up to 22-10. Rest was history.
Yeah, it was an interesting return because it was a big punt. It backed him. He was backing way up. It was sort of like the Vikings won a couple of weeks ago, where the guy's backing up, decides to field it. The Vikings guy made a mess of it, and that ended up swinging that game in the other direction. Washington decides to field it inside the 5. Normally, like you say, you let those go. But this was like such a big punt that he kind of outkicked the coverage. There was nobody within 10 yards of him when he decided to field it. It's hard to tell if he'd read that on the fly and sort of realized that, hey, I've got a lot of space to work with here if I do decide to catch this. Or if he was just like he'd locked into catching it and hadn't quite realized how far he'd backed up, which is easy to do as well. Either way, by the time he caught the ball, once he'd made the kind of initial move, he had a lot of open real estate and then ended up returning it the whole way.
Let's talk Jags first. Obviously, they needed this win. They had a rough outing in London last week against the Bears. Much cleaner in this one. I want to talk about it from a Patriots perspective because Gerard Mayo had some pointed comments after the game.
Oh, yeah?
Called the team soft. Ooh. So we'll address that in a minute here. But from a Jags perspective, they protected Trevor Lawrence well. It was his 3rd straight effective game. Brian Thomas Jr. continues to be a huge factor with 5 catches for 89 yards plus a 2-point conversion. And then there was a point in the 3rd into the 4th quarter where the Jags just ran the ball nonstop. Patriots couldn't stop them, I think, leading to Gerard Mayo's comments. But yeah, Jacksonville looking much better, at least especially offensively, than they have in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think they settled into the game once, like, the Patriots got up early. It looked like the Jags were going to get beaten, and coming off the game a week ago, it's like this is the kind of, foreign trip that gets people fired, right? Coming out of those 2 games the way they had. And they right the ship. Like Brian Thomas Jr. is a huge part of that. The deep catch over Christian Gonzalez, which is a really nice pass as well. And they did crawl their way out of it. And, Tank Bigsby, I mean, they started the season with Travis Etienne still being their number 1 running back. And yet from week 1, Bigsby has been the more impressive back. Like every time that guy touches the football, he's making good things happen. With Etienne out hurt, Bigsby got the opportunity to be the bell cow for them. And, I mean, they shouldn't go back like that. They're way better with him in the backfield. So, yeah, that was a big part. I mean, New England couldn't stop them. And, all the focus on New England's offense with the Drake May, Jacoby Brissett, the lack of receivers, the lack of offensive line, it has kind of overshadowed the fact that this defense simply is not what it used to be. And I'm sure Belichick no longer being there is a big part of that.
I like to highlight the pass protection, pass rush for both teams. when it stands out. So from a Jags perspective, excellent pass protection. From a Patriots perspective, they had one pressure as of right now per PFF.
That's not great.
One pressure from one player. A couple other quick wins, but like pretty poor pass rush effort from New England. So Trevor Lawrence had clean pockets to work from, and he took advantage. I thought Jags really had it going offensively. And then when the Patriots tried to make their comeback, had some, Jags held them in check after being down 10-0. From a New England perspective, I don't know what the production numbers end up looking like for Drake May. He put the ball in harm's way a bunch in the second half when they were already down a couple scores, but I thought he looked good again overall, right? Still a few misses. There's still some footwork things that show up, but also some big plays down the field. And again, I think just the situation in New England where you don't have a great offensive line, you've got a revolving door of receivers. My guy DeMario Douglas, who I took on my Prize Picks lineup, apparently was sick, so he had a couple catches early and then didn't play.
Brutal. That's tough.
Yeah.
Does he?
But I don't. It doesn't matter if he came in because I had Jameson Williams.
I
needed more than like 50, and he ended up with -4.
Yeah.
But you have Jalen Polk as a second-round pick. Ball hit his hands like 3 times. The defender, broke up a bunch. Then he fell down on a 2-point conversion. Like the Patriots supporting cast feels like it's still letting down Drake May, who I would be encouraged by. I think
he's
through
looked
2
good.
starts.
Yeah, I mean, he's looked good. That's the thing is, it's not about whether he looks good or not. It's about whether this is damaging for him to play and most of the season with this kind of supporting cast. And I think we're right on that borderline. Like the Patriots' offensive line is pretty terrible. Even in this game, they were rolling in backups. The Jags, I don't think necessarily took advantage of that the way they could have. The receivers have been terrible as well, outside of a couple of players. Jalen Polk had an awful game. It's reached the stage where, he's a rookie. He's trying to kind of keep his own confidence high. He's saying things like, I still have confidence. I still think I have the best hands in the NFL. So, now the beat writers are ripping him to pieces. You know what I mean? It's just bad. And the question is not can Drake May elevate the situation? It's more, does playing 10 games with this kind of supporting cast do him lasting damage? And we don't know that yet. But it's right on that borderline of completely untenable.
I feel like May's handling it really well.
He is,
so
but
far.
you can handle that kind of thing well for a couple of games. The question is, how long can you handle it for?
There's a couple plays where it's like a clean pocket, and I feel like he's just rushed. Like there was a little hitch route he just airmailed, and I'm not completely blaming that on the offensive line when they didn't give up pressure.
Right.
But I feel like he's feeling rushed in this game. Also, Jermichael Hasty feels like he's my guy that I always feel like impresses me when he plays football. Beautiful. Catch and run for a touchdown earlier on. He was with the Niners for years ago. He was with the Jags. Reminds me of Dion Lewis, who was lurking around the league for years, and every time he touched the football, I'm like, dude, give this guy the ball more. That's like Jermichael Hasty for me through the years. Had a nice touchdown reception in that game. But Gerard Mayo's calling the team soft. They got run over left and right. I mean, is this a surprise given how bad we expected them to be?
I
There's
don't
the
know.
quote. Gerard Mayo says, we're a soft football team across the board.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily that they're soft. They're just bad. That's the bigger problem. You know what I mean? They're just not good anywhere.
All right, glad we got to the bottom of that.
But as you say, that was kind of expected going into the season. I mean, they flashed. Really, it's that Cincinnati game. They shocked everybody. They beat Cincinnati. They looked quite encouraging for a week or two. And then they've become the team that everybody thought they were going to be, which is there's a pretty good chance they're going to go for the number 1 overall pick this year.
Is Gerard Mayo on the Ken Wisenhunt track? Do you remember the old Ken Wisenhunt stat?
No.
When he was the head coach of the Titans? If you gave him over 100 days, I forget what it was 100 days of preparation time.
Yeah.
He was 3-0.
Right.
Because he'd win opening day every year. But then he was 3-30 otherwise.
Yeah.
Because right now, Gerard Mayo, with hundreds of days of preparation, is 1-0.
Right.
Anytime you're within a week, though, he's 0-6. So I'm just saying, something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's not great.
Just like Urban Meyer's 1-0 across the pond. Across the pond. There was one other thing I wanted to add.
Yeah.
Oh, last thing. It had crossed my mind because the Patriots as a franchise, prior to Tom Brady getting there, weren't really that great. Remember, historically one of the worst in the NFL. Their winning percentage, I was just looking it up. The winning percentage for the Patriots in the 10 years prior to Tom Brady was .410. So they won 41% of their games. Brady comes in, they win like 78% of their games.
I forget.
And after that, they're almost identical. It's .405. So they went from 40% in 10 years prior to Brady to 78% and then back down to 40%. Since that point, just a neat little,
I forget what the thing was. They brought up some stat on the broadcast that they were basically, they'd set a run, they'd equaled a record or whatever. That was basically, it was the first kind of pre-Kraft, number that they'd hit again.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the worst thing they've done since, 19 whatever, which is the year before Kraft took over. Like they've now gone full circle and are clearing, dynasty. And then this was before Robert Kraft bought the team. They were this bad.
And to be clear, it was interesting. I pulled that number, went from like 1990, 91, 92. They were horrible then. When Kraft did buy the team, they were better for a bit. But again, like the couple of years before Brady got there, they were, 8-8, 5-11, 0-2 before Brady took over. It's just an interesting line in the sand for New England. Anything else on this one?
Nope.
Done here. Indianapolis Colts get the win against the Miami Dolphins, 16-10. Colts move to 4-3. Dolphins fall to 2-4. Anthony Richardson made his return, finishes 10 of 24 for 129. I want to talk about him for a few minutes. Also carried the ball a bunch, led the team with 56 rushing yards. From Miami's perspective, Tyler Snoop Huntley, only 7 of 13 before getting hurt. Tim Boyle had to come in and play football, could not lead the comeback for the Dolphins.
I would be fascinated to be a fly on the wall during those, kind of roster cut down meetings when somebody's making the case for Tim Boyle to be we need Tim Boyle on this roster. He needs to be the guy on the 53. It's like, what's the argument at this point?
All right, ready for my baseball reference?
Okay.
So I have an old friend. He's in scouting right now for, I think he's in Seattle. And back in the day, we used to just talk ball all the time. My buddy in baseball. And he goes, have you ever looked up Kevin Jarvis's stats? And he's just like this random reliever. And Kevin Jarvis had a 12-year major league career. You won't understand this, but he has a 6 ERA.
Okay.
Right? Like a good ERA is 3.
I knew that. I would have said 3.
A good ERA is 3. I had a 4.9. 4.9 in AAA in the Pacific Coast League, which is always inflated.
Okay.
You adjust that down to like a 4. This guy had a 6 ERA for 12 years. It's not like you had a 6 ERA for 3 years. We gave you a chance. This dude got chance after chance after chance. He almost has 800 innings in the majors with not once did he pitch well at any point and kept getting good chances.
Yeah.
It's Tim Boyle.
Right. I mean, he's one of those guys who,
because I'll give you the football stats on Boyle in a second here too.
There's just no statistical case to be made ever.
Tim Boyle's career he has 4 touchdowns, 12 picks, which he had a year in college where he had 1 touchdown and 10 picks.
That's what I was going to say.
This isn't like, oh man, he just lost it.
Right.
4 touchdowns, 12 picks at 5 yards per attempt, 5.2 yards per attempt. Like no number's good.
Tim Boyle's college career stats are 1 passing touchdown, 13 interceptions. This was somebody who's never been good.
So he's better in the NFL, which is great. I mean, again, your trajectory is good. Like I don't call for people's jobs or anything. I'm not trying to pick on Tim Boyle, but it is a legitimate question. Seth Walder from ESPN said yesterday, like, why would Tim Boyle be on a roster? Like,
it's
you
not like
can't have another third quarterback, and then now he's the backup.
Yeah.
He comes in as the backup of choice. Now, he's not the reason Miami lost. It's just a fascinating case.
I mean, he's a reason.
He's not yeah.
They put him in at a point. I mean, the game ended a 1-score game, right? They put him in at a point where if we had a quarterback that could execute a drive, we can win this game. Only we have Tim Boyle. So that's not going to happen. I mean, it is fascinating.
Did he get in because he was buddies with Rodgers? Like Rodgers just liked him or something a few years ago?
I mean, that's definitely part of it.
I need the story.
The other thing I would say is that if you really like Tim Boyle, and once injuries hit and you're 3 deep into the depth chart, he'll be available. You can call him up. Nobody else is picking. Like
that. Go back to I'm the advocate for the backup QB house. They all live at the house.
He's in,
and you call it. Give me Gradkowski.
Right.
Give me Tim Boyle. Right. You call the QB house, and they're all ready to go during the season. They got all the playbooks there, ready to go.
Right. He'll be shooting pool in the basement or whatever. You
Yeah.
just call him up. He'll be there.
I mean, that like, let's play that game. Tim Boyle sitting at a house with 32 other backup quarterbacks. How many other quarterbacks are you calling before you're like, yeah, give me Tim?
Quite a lot.
He's the one that I want.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyway, Dolphins are 2-4. They're in an interesting spot here because there's reports that Tua might be coming back this week, right, for week 8.
Yeah.
That he's going to practice and maybe come back. They're sitting here at 2-4.
And that's just going to they're just sort of going to slip that into the news cycle, you know? Oh, by the way, Tua's back. Like they've sort of bypassed the old, is Tua not even going to continue to play football? And they're like, yeah, he's just back next week.
It's a similar schedule that I'm going to recite probably if I remember when we talk about the Jets in a couple hours. But Miami has the Cardinals, then they go to Buffalo, but then the Rams, Raiders, and Patriots. Like if the Dolphins they could easily win 4 out of those 5 games, and they're right back into this. Obviously, you want to try to beat Buffalo and make up ground in the division, but Dolphins aren't completely out of this, and so you could see them going back to Tua. And as much as we had this Tua's a system quarterback discussion, more and more evidence, no matter who they throw out there, this offense does not function without him at the helm.
No, and I do think it has been quite damaging for McDaniel in terms of he has not been able to execute any kind of functioning offense. Again, it's difficult, right? We said this for years. If you don't have your starting quarterback, it's really hard in the NFL. That being said, there's direct contrast with somebody like Matt LaFleur, who was able to get not just a functioning, but like a good offense out of a guy like Malik Willis, who had previously been non-functional in other offenses. Like, you can go out there and craft a different offense that's completely independent from the one you have with your starting quarterback, that's good, that's hooked up, that's everything you want it to be. When that guy goes down, you can change things and still make it work. And McDaniel hasn't been able to come close to doing that with multiple different quarterbacks.
Richardson comes in, as I mentioned, 10 for 24. I mean, he was kind of all over the place again. I'm just going to go through my notes here. And I know, look, he's coming off of missing a couple weeks. Is he just always rusty because he doesn't get to play back to back? Rusty. I said, look, Anthony Richardson's completing 46% of his passes today, and somebody's like, oh, he's rusty. I'm like, well, yeah, it's because he's been hurt in half of his starts over 2 years.
Permanent rust.
Misses an in-cut. It would have been a pick if it was on target. Misses another in-cut. Overthrows a deep ball. Had a couple really nice deep comebacks. Like, you could see the deep out and the deep comeback. Had a beautiful throw before the half that led to a field goal. Layered throw over the middle of the field. But it's like for every good that I write down, there's a bad as well.
Sure.
He steps into pressure on an RPO, like just drifted into it. So the feel in the pocket isn't really great, and then just the pure accuracy. Like, I don't know how to. The whole discussion around Anthony Richardson was like, we just kind of hope he hits more throws, much like Josh Allen did. Josh Allen, maybe at an extreme level, even Lamar to a point. They had accuracy issues coming out of college that got way better in the NFL. Anthony Richardson, it's literally just like when the throw's open, you got to hit more of them. Yeah. One of the big plays was basically a prayer to Alec Pierce, which is, fine. Like, you learn that from Flacco. You throw some prayers. Sometimes they get answered. Had one of those earlier. But overall, very inconsistent. Still took a whole bunch of big hits.
Learned at the church of Flacco.
Yeah.
Throw up a prayer, and every now and again it's going to get answered.
Yeah, exactly. And usually underthrow it is what you want to do. We have a stat here. I'm just going to read it. Anthony Richardson having a 2024 to forget. Here's where he stands among all QBs with 100-plus dropbacks. 48.5% completion is last. Touchdown to interception ratio is last. Passer ratings last. EPA per dropback is 27th, all from the 33rd Team FB on Twitter. 33rd Team's Twitter account.
Yep, it's that.
So, my boy Josh Downs, just not a fit in the Anthony Richardson offense.
No, well, because Josh Downs requires, a high volume of accurate passes. That's not what you get in an Anthony Richardson
Flacco's
offense.
Been giving him to. So anyway, it's just, look, Richardson also had a couple design runs that were huge and, one that sealed the deal, but just looking for that consistency from him.
Yeah. And it hasn't been there.
It's good. working together for 10 years. I can sense when you're ready to move on to the next game.
Well, ready to move on. Yeah, I'm ready to move on.
Do you have anything else?
No, not for this game. Ready to move on from this game. And look, I'm going to pull back break the fourth wall, right? I'm going to need to go and source a tissue at some point because for some reason, as soon as we sat down, my nose decided to shrink.
I knew something was off.
Yeah, so I'm just waiting for that opportunity where you can ramble for like a minute or so to camera and I can leg it to the bathroom and be back and no one will know anything.
I have an idea for you.
Yeah?
This episode's brought to you by BetterHelp, and it's like this month's all about gratitude. I'm going to show gratitude to my entire family, my wife, my kids. I'm thankful for them every single day. So the month's all about gratitude, and along with my family that I just shouted out, someone else I want to thank that doesn't get thanked enough, and it's ourselves. Sometimes it's hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best to make sense of everything, and in this crazy world, that isn't easy. So here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. And so BetterHelp is an opportunity for you to do that. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. That's what therapy does. BetterHelp is here to help you get the help that you need. And it isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. It's for anybody that need somebody to talk to and need some help here. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/checkthemic today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/checkthemic. Go check it out right now. The convenience of being online, I think, is the huge sell here for BetterHelp.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. I mean, there's still a stigma that shouldn't be there attached to mental health, and the ability to do it all online, remove that hurdle that a lot of people need to clear to go get therapy, to find the place, to drive to the office, et cetera. All gone. You can do the whole thing online and at your convenience.
All right, man, let's get to Buffalo Bills and the Tennessee Titans. Bills get the win here, and I just clicked off the score. It's right there, 34-10. Their third win by 21 plus points. Oh, I love the notes you guys add in here.
And their records are there.
That's
Look,
huge.
this is just perfectly set up.
Bills moved to 5. I could just read the screen.
Right. You don't need to do any prep.
Ben, you're a hero.
You just look at the TV in front of you.
I'm just going to. Bills defeat Titans 34-10. Third win by 21 plus points this season. Titans fall to 1-5. The Bills are 5-2.
Just all the data right in front of you.
It's like I just read the script.
Yeah, it's nice.
Discuss. Mason Rudolph. So we discussed this a little bit in last night's show on the instant reaction. We weren't expecting Mason Rudolph to get the start. That info came, Saturday? Friday or Saturday?
Late.
It was very late. Will Levis, who did play last week, had a shoulder injury. You're gonna air quote it. You're gonna say shoulder injury. It was injured 3 weeks ago now. Then they had a bye, came off the bye, threw for under 100 yards last week. They go through the whole week of practice. Mason Rudolph declared the starter. This weekend before the game, Titans got up early. It was like, all right, look, it's a completely different team with Mason Rudolph at the helm, but wasn't to last.
No. I mean, look, I can relate as a man that did pull-ups on Friday and the shoulders wrecked on Monday, Sometimes it takes a day or two.
You and Will Levis,
It's a couple of jacked humans,
Yeah.
right? I understand. Will Levis is probably out there in the gym, pumping some iron late in the week, and then there was a day where it took a little while, and then on the Saturday it flared up. And they're like, sorry, Will, we've got to shut you down. That's too many push-ups.
Do you think that's what it was? Okay, by the way, just really quick. We were talking the self-injury thing. The self-injury thing kind of got me thinking.
Self-injury Hall of Fame.
I've injured myself more than I can remember. And there's some bad ones in there. I might have to save those for Wednesday. But I've got 3 off the top of my head where I was at fault for injuring myself. I'm over here making fun of these other professional athletes when maybe I've got 3 of my own instances here.
Well, you are a two-time PFF Bull in a China Shop award winner.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you just walking through the office is perfectly liable to smash things, destroy, just leave a path of destruction in your
My
wake.
poor kid. The number of times I was holding one of my children when they were a baby and I just turned and head hits the wall, doorways, whatever it might be. My
I'm not
kids.
sure that's something you want to admit in public.
My kids but that wasn't. It was just an accident. But
I don't think that makes it. I mean, it makes it better, but not that much better.
Kids are built to handle clumsy parents.
Okay.
I think Churchill said that.
Go with that. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, remind me on Wednesday. There might be 3 embarrassing stories that I could tell about self-injuries.
Perfect.
Carry on.
Sweet.
Because you were suggesting that Levis maybe like got after it a little too hard in the gym.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was hurt a couple weeks ago. So.
Sure. I do wonder how much of this was like, convenient from a Callahan point of view. Like, hey, Will, what if your shoulder was to flare up this week? Let's take a look at Mason. Let's take a look at Mason in a pressure-free environment where if he stinks, we can go right back to you the next week and nobody cares.
We'll talk about scheduled injuries in the next game when we talk about the Browns game.
Perfect. Mason Rudolph didn't fix it, I guess, is the big point, right? Like, he came in, it wasn't dramatically better than Will Levis. It was better, I guess, but they still, the offense wasn't overwhelming. It was still the defense trying to do the Lions' work, and they did for a while. Like, this was a close game, and then Buffalo went away.
Yeah, there was a point in the game where Josh Allen was like 4 for 11 passing. I still have this belief that the Titans' defense, I think I described them yesterday as, feisty at times.
Yeah.
That's my big hedge that, like, man, they should be better. They should be able to play a little better coverage on the back end. They're physical against the run. They've been, sneaky good, and then gave up a lot of big plays in the second half. Yeah,
and I think it is generally a pretty decent defense. But when your offense gets nothing going, like the defense has to play every single drive, they don't get much rest, et cetera, et cetera. It gets worse the longer the game goes when that's the dynamic. Obviously for Buffalo, the other story was, Amari Cooper. They traded for him.
Yes.
It was kind of a funny game because the very first target in his direction, which I think might have been the first play, he dropped, which has been a hallmark of his NFL career. For a guy that, was a genuinely phenomenal prospect, basically flawless prospect, guy who runs routes great, wins at every level of the defense, is big, fast, good after the catch, et cetera, ticked every box, just a great prospect. The only thing that's sort of marred him has been drops, which has been fairly consistent.
They come in bunches, though.
They do.
Even at Bama, they came in bunches. I can't remember.
Yeah.
He had 0.
Right.
And then he had 4 in one game against LSU. They always came in bunches.
Yeah. He had a bad year drop rate-wise, and even that, as you said, was it
was all one game or
2
something.
games. Yeah. But it was just sort of fitting that you trade for this guy. He can answer your problem at the X receiver spot, and then very first play, drop. Oh, okay.
Is it by the way, Devontae Adams, very first play, he got targeted as well. Is that the easiest bet in the world? As soon as you trade for a receiver,
yes.
you got to get him involved early, right, with the quick little hitch route.
And then, ironically, he scored his first touchdown in this game, and that came from the slot. We finally get the guy that can answer our X receiver question mark on the outside, and his production is going to come from the slot like everybody else.
Beautiful route, and I just saw somebody tweeting through it. When you zoom in, he didn't know the play call. You get that a lot. Receivers are they do the palm up. I don't know what I'm running. Keon Coleman, I think, just pointed to the seam, and he runs. He's isolated on the safety. He runs a beautiful route for a touchdown because it was a blitz answer. Yeah, I thought Cooper showed his route running on that. A couple different plays, right? The touchdown, there was kind of a back shoulder that was front shouldered to him from Josh Allen, but he completely won at the line of scrimmage. Again, I think just in a couple of routes, you see what Cooper can bring to this offense and his ability to win on the outside and win as a route runner, which I think, and if they do move him to the slot, he's not this crazy yards after the catch type of guy, but it's another mismatch weapon for this Bills offense, which has more and more of those.
Yeah, I mean, he can play there. The big differentiator, though, is that he can clearly win on the outside in a way these other guys can't. And then in this game, Keon Coleman ends up with a big game. Now, there were a couple of almost plays in there as well, which I think will be a hallmark of his career. There's a touch of the George Pickens to him in terms of he's not always going to get a lot of separation. And if you're going to be that guy, you basically need to be as good as George Pickens at those contested catch situations. I don't know if Keon Coleman is, but he can have games where he ends up putting it all together and you end up with amazing production.
Yeah, I mean, he had a really nice catch and run. Again, a lot of big plays in the second half for the Bills, 57-yarder for Coleman. He finished with 4 catches for 125, almost had that one-handed touchdown. That was the almost play that you were talking about. So after the slow start, Josh Allen settled down. Finishes with 323 yards and 2 scores, in part by that, the catch and run helped by Keon Coleman. Khalil Shakir made a lot of plays down the stretch when the Bills were trying to ice it. And, they look good, moved to 5-2.
Yep. Comfortable win in the end.
Ray Davis and James Cook returned. He found the end zone on the ground. Ray Davis, again, finds the end zone late. Buffalo takes care of business. Tennessee, I was a little Mason curious, Sam, and I don't know if I honestly don't know what the dynamic was this week, if it was legit Levis came down with an injury late. Well, I didn't see the reports whether or not Rudolph was taking first team reps at any point or whatever, but I did theorize that maybe this offense would look a little bit more efficient because that's another team that should be better. And the other thing I wanted to mention here, to give Buffalo credit, Gregory Rousseau, unblockable in this game. Tennessee's pass protection, terrible. Ed Oliver had a huge game, very disruptive against the run. Buffalo's front played really well, so no matter who was the quarterback, they probably weren't having much success in Tennessee either way.
Yeah, there's certainly still a problem. Right tackle in particular is still a major problem spot for that Tennessee offensive line. So it's not, whoever is there has not got the best situation to work from, but it's not going to get that much better. You're going to have to figure out a way of making it work.
All right, man. Anything else on Buffalo
and
Tennessee? No more use for this game. Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Bengals get the win. What was the final here? 21-14. That's right. Cleveland scored late. Oh, it's right up just. Oh, but I have to delay it.
There it is.
Bengals defeat the Browns 21-14. Cincinnati has won 3 of their last 4 games. They move to 3-4. Browns fall to 1-6. Biggest story coming out of this, of course, Deshaun Watson tears his Achilles.
Yep.
He was 15 of 17 for 128 at that point, and Achilles torn, season over. Pretty quick report that was the case. Other big story before the game was that Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the second-year player for the Browns, was listed as the backup over Jameis Winston for the first time all season.
Yeah, I saw that. There was a tweet.
Suspect. It's all suspect, Sam.
It was a little weird. I saw there was a tweet from That's Good Sports that was like, Deshaun Watson is playing so badly that it got Jameis Winston demoted. And that, it was bizarre because people have obviously been clamoring for Jameis Winston to get the start over Deshaun Watson for weeks. That's been the discussion. That's been what's thrown at Stefanski every single week. And they head into this game and decide to go in a different direction at the backup spot at the exact game where Deshaun Watson's Achilles just snaps on him randomly on a drop back and he's done for the year. And then who knows how much longer beyond that. And yeah, the irony of that is he was actually playing okay in this game. And, the Bengals housed the opening kickoff with Charlie Jones scoring. And they still had to grind out a win despite, Cleveland losing their quarterback, despite everything. The Bengals just have this problem beating Cleveland. But yeah, the dynamic with it's such a strange situation now for Cleveland where this quarterback that has been the millstone around their neck despite being a $230 million guaranteed, the trade, everything we broke down on Wednesday's show last week, he's now out of the picture for an extended period of time with a torn Achilles. We've no idea what they're going to do. They have to make a change now, enforced. Is it Jameis Winston? Are they going to want to see what they have in Dorian Thompson-Robinson? What are they going to do at that spot? And, there's the whole dynamic of we had Kalen Keller on the show, weeks ago talking about insurance for quarterback contracts. The Browns have Deshaun Watson insured for quite a lot of that money. They're going to get some kind of cap relief because of this next year. So in a way, it's a positive thing for them in that it forces them to make the move that people have been clamoring for anyway. They get cap relief next year because of the insurance. We get to actually see what this thing looks like with a different quarterback. There's a lot of positives to this, even though obviously Deshaun Watson is now Achillesless.
Yeah, Jason from Over the Cap talking about the insurance, the reimbursement would depend on time. He's unable to play. Per source, the Browns only have up to $13.9 million of the 2024 compensation insured, and then almost his entire 2025 salary is insured. So if injury prevented him from playing next year, that would get you cap relief again in the following year. Also, friend Greg Rosenthal theorized, is this the last snap we've ever seen from Deshaun Watson in the
Yeah.
NFL. Because I think at this point, is it Browns or bust? Like, if the Browns don't want Deshaun Watson, is any other team going out of their way to bring him in? If they brought him in, it would probably be on the cheap because the Browns are on the hook for all the money. And if someone else wanted to bring Watson in, it would be a Russell Wilson-like, hey, the Browns are paying all the money, we're going to take a chance on Watson. But, like,
Well, then you've got, like, who wants that headache?
who wants the headache, and then who wants the football player the way he's played?
Yeah.
Both of them.
But for a guy that has the resume of Deshaun Watson on the field, there are teams that would want to kick the tires on that if eventually the Browns got rid of him,
Sure.
independent of the off the field stuff. But now you're like,
Yeah, and then
okay,
when
kicking
that's
the
in there,
tires
yeah.
necessitates opening that Pandora's box. Who wants any part of that? Nobody.
And we've just seen from a Browns perspective, from a PR perspective, from an
Right.
on-field perspective. One of the saddest things here is I don't know what Austin Gale's going to tweet about on Sunday nights now, because he'd been sending out the lowly Deshaun Watson stats. Just one more, Tyler, for the road, please. One more. Bear with us. Austin Gale, last night, 14 hours ago, says last one.
Last one.
This is it. I think he's moved on to the Raiders run game for depressing tweets. But right now,
As long as he still has some, milieu of
he's got
depressing tweets.
some kind of sadness that he could tweet through on Sunday night. But Deshaun Watson, it was like a tweet thread every week.
Yeah.
No quarterback with 200-plus dropbacks in weeks 1 through 7 since at least the year 2000. Y2K. Has a lower EPA per dropback average than Deshaun Watson.
He did it.
Not just a new Browns low, a new league low for weeks 1 through 7.
He did it. He set the record.
And
He
then
ended
blew
up-
out his Achilles.
He ended up bottom.
Did the Browns call in the injury?
The hit, Haslam from the booth.
Did they tell Watson to fake it? Did they?
I mean, if they did, they did a really
s-
good job of it
Did they
because
snipe him?
he somehow managed to fake the telltale ripple of the
He did.
calf
He did
as
the ripple.
Achilles snapped. I would imagine that's a pretty hard thing to fake.
I'm just saying it was a weird. They announced DTR. They
the
suggested
kind of thing-
DTR might be coming in. If you didn't have the video of him actually blowing the Achilles, you might come up with a little conspiracy theory here.
It is the kind of thing that makes you believe that we're all in a simulation, that we're in the Matrix, et cetera. Like, there's no way this confluence of events could just organically happen, and yet here we are.
So that's probably it. Talking about Deshaun Watson on the show for the rest of the year. He's out. DTR came in, wasn't much better. Jameis does come in. Do you have some Jameis stats?
Well, he is tied with Deshaun Watson in touchdown passes over the last 3 weeks, and he came in with under 4 minutes to go in the game. He is tied in terms of third down conversions with Deshaun Watson over the last month.
That's insane.
And he came in with less than 4 minutes in the game. I don't really see an argument for going with anybody other than Jameis Winston as your quarterback if you're the Browns for the foreseeable.
I mean, the only argument is that they're trying to draft a quarterback high. And again, there's who the heck knows with this quarterback class if anybody's worth drafting. Sitting there at 1-6. If you're actually trying to win games, though, I would give it a run with Jameis Winston.
Yeah, and at this point, you're not just trying to win games. You're trying to rescue the morale of the locker room. This thing's in a bad state at this spot.
Nick Chubb did make his return, found the end zone, only 22 yards on 11 carries. Both run defenses were really good in this game. Offense was, tight for both teams. The Bengals returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown, and after that, they couldn't get much going offensively. So from Cincinnati's perspective, they moved to 3-4, clawing back into this thing in the AFC. Not too many people played well on the offensive side, but when they needed big plays, it was Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow to T. Higgins. Their stars made plays when they needed it, but very inconsistent performance by this Bengals offense. Again, struggling against this Browns defense here.
The Bengals at one point were 0 for 7 on third down. I think they ended up converting one or two late, but they couldn't keep drives going. They were crapping out. Yeah, you have to feel good about Nick Chubb. Not just playing, he looked pretty good. I mean, he got in the end zone and had to do it twice. Like, they negated his first touchdown. He had to go and score again. he didn't, look like Nick Chubb. Like the production obviously was not particularly impressive, but just a great feel-good story to see that guy come back from his devastating knee injury and be a factor.
Yeah, that was great seeing Nick Chubb out there. So we had talked about, Cincinnati they're a couple plays away from having a much different season. Offense hasn't been as good the last couple weeks, but the defense has been better, right? We were wondering about that a couple weeks ago. You're in rough shape over there, huh?
Dude, I don't know what the hell has happened to me.
What you got? Oh, there you go. Just use the mute button if you can.
Yeah, the cough button?
Yeah, cough button is what I meant. Sorry. We just mute Sam every time he goes to blow his nose. Cincinnati's defense playing better the last couple weeks, but again, against Daniel Jones and the Giants and against Deshaun Watson and DTR of the Browns. But, Cincinnati stays in it, and Stars played like Stars when they needed to. The 2 touchdowns by Jamar Chase and T. Higgins.
Yeah, they haven't looked impressive, but they're at least getting wins, which is just keeping them alive. Like, they didn't have any margin for error anymore, given the situation they put themselves in. They still don't really, and they're going to need to be better if they're going to beat the big teams and go on a run and, shock anybody this season. They haven't got there yet, but at least they're getting wins while they tread water and try and find that spark.
Anything else on this game?
No.
We're cooking. We're cruising through this thing.
Well, we haven't reached the game where there's the endless notes.
The endless notes game?
Yeah.
There's a couple big notes games. Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. Seahawks 34-14 over the Falcons. Impressive win here for Seattle. Both teams 4-3 coming out of this. Seattle was on a 3-game losing streak, but they get back into the win column. I was really impressed with Seattle. They got up early, the way the scoring went. They were up 10-0. Atlanta comes back. It's 10-7. Seattle comes back with a touchdown. Atlanta gets within 3. Seattle comes back with a touchdown. And then the biggest play of the game, as Atlanta is trying to make their comeback, early fourth quarter, 3rd and 9, Kirk Cousins strip sacks by Boye Mafe. Derek Hall returns at 64 yards for a touchdown. That put Seattle up 31-14. Pretty much sealed the deal for them. Impressive win on the road against an Atlanta team that we'd been talking up, had been really finding their way offensively in the recent weeks.
Yeah, and I still think, the offense I think was not too bad in this game. That play you talked about, the strip sack, which is really all on Cousins. He's escaping the pocket. He just took too long to get rid of the ball. Like he knew it was coming.
It's a strip sack by name, but it's really like it's not.
It's like the guy that was
a blindsided strip sack. It's like you knew it was coming and you tried to do too much.
Yeah, it's like the guy that was headed to sack you. You basically clattered the ball off him as you were trying to get rid of it. So it's a quote unquote strip sack, but it's really Cousins fumbled the ball away while getting sacked is what happened there. And that was one where, you're Kirk Cousins, you're not really mobile anymore. Get rid of it. Get rid of it faster, And those are the types of plays where I think the lack of mobility is a real problem, where it's like if you're escaping to your left, because now you've got to do weird things with your body in terms of contorting it to throw the ball, just to get rid of it. Even if you're just trying to heave it out of bounds, you need to be able to sort of swing your body around and torque and get rid of the ball that way, and he can't really do that anymore. But it is funny, like early in this game, you've got rollouts, the thing that everyone was like, oh, where are the rollouts in this offense? This can't function. You've got toss plays. That was another thing people were clamoring for. Like Cousins can't make the mesh point an outside zone. Why aren't they just tossing the ball?
They ran an inside zone instead of an outside zone.
Like all of the things that everyone was like panicking about week 1. Where are all these things in this offense? I've got 7 ways of fixing the Kirk Cousins offense. Why are the Falcons not doing any of them? Well, they are now. They're doing all of them. Like the panic, the hysteria over this offense after week 1. They are now doing everything that people were clamoring for. And it still wasn't enough because Seattle, their offense was doing really well. From like right in the first drive, Geno was dropping dimes left and right. Receivers weren't necessarily coming down with them. As the game progressed, they did a lot more, and that put them back to the lead, and then that play really sort of sealed it.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on Atlanta's offense really quick. I mean, they only scored 14 points, but the run game was good again. I mean, I love watching Bijan Robinson play football. He's like an artist out there. He just knows where to run. I mean, this is how I describe Jonathan Brooks at draft time.
He knows where to run.
He knows where to run, how to get there, and gets through people in creative ways to get there. It's called being a good running back.
Yeah.
But he's just so fun to watch Bijan. I love that just two-headed monster of Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. I mean, they're so good again, and it didn't matter today for Atlanta or yesterday for Atlanta. Because the pass game was inconsistent. You have the sack that, completely turned things around, but they have that run game going, and they should be able to continue to build off that, work play action off of it, and get those playmakers involved more and more. From Seattle's perspective, I thought Geno Smith to DK Metcalf, that was one of those, the big long touchdown that he had. It reminded me, remember the first year Geno was the starter? He had that throw against the Saints in the Dome. It was like a deep seam right in between 4 defenders, and it was like, whoa, Geno. That was unbelievable. Right around this time of year, week 6, week 7, whatever it was. Reminded me of that pass where it was just great, it's perfect ball placement on the throw to DK Metcalf for the touchdown. DK ends up getting hurt, so that's something to monitor coming out of this game. But Geno Smith, a couple touchdowns. The wheel route to Ken Walker as well. Walker had a really nice 20-yard touchdown run as well. I think the same way I've been talking up the Falcons offense, I want to like the Seahawks offense in the same way. I think they have a similar group of playmakers, and this was one of the first games where they stayed on schedule, where they could run the ball a little bit and get Ken Walker involved, and they move the ball way more effectively than they had in recent weeks.
Yeah, it was a perfect game for them stylistically, though, in terms of their biggest weakness being that pass protection, offensive line, 4/5 of which is a question mark. But you run up against a team that can't generate pressure, and
Agreed.
you look a lot better. Like the Falcons' defense is an ideal defense for the Seattle offense to look really good against. Their issue is what happens when you run up against teams that have defensive linemen that can exploit that. Now, even notably within their division, San Francisco have Nick Bosa. Like, can you figure out how to get him blocked for long enough for that offense to function as well as it did in this game?
Byron Murphy for the Seahawks, he came back for the first time in a few weeks. He looked good. Maybe his best game as a pro as far as pure disruption. Very good against the run. He is, for a guy that's like right around 300 pounds, he's got this anchor that plays like a 330-pounder that kept showing up in college as well. Impressed that it is in the NFL. He's just really tough to move, and he's got an ability to slip off blocks and just be really disruptive, especially in the run game. So when Bijan was not doing his artistry running through people, it was Byron Murphy blowing up plays for Seattle.
It's so funny because Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat, the 2 Texas defensive tackles, like their deployment at Texas speaks to this unusual skill set that they each have that you wouldn't expect, right, for their body types. You got Byron Murphy, who's like classically 3-tech shaped, 300 pounds, the sort of quick penetrating, pass rushing defensive tackle. And then Tavondre Sweat, who's 366 pounds. You're like, that guy's nose tackle, run stuffer. And yet the thing that characterizes Tavondre Sweat is that guy has freakish athleticism. He can actually go side to side and make plays, chasing down players or penetrating into the backfield. Meanwhile, Byron Murphy at 300 pounds can like anchor like a nose tackle and hold up against the run. And it's why, despite being shaped the other way at Texas, they were often deployed where Byron Murphy was the nose tackle and Tavondre Sweat was not. And you're sort of seeing that play out in the NFL.
Yeah, it's been I enjoy watching Murphy play. It was good to see him back for Seattle. I think just to touch on what you mentioned before, Atlanta's pass rush, I do feel like a broken record. I will mention them again in every preview show. If they cannot affect the quarterback more effectively, and especially in this game, whereas you mentioned Seattle was having massive issues protecting Geno Smith, and Atlanta having trouble even against poor offensive lines getting any sort of pressure. And you saw that in this game here.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No,
on this
I don't
one.
think so. We're flying.
We are flying. There's 2 really long games that we have to discuss.
Yeah.
But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. So Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I already told you about my previous experience with Game Time. It is awesome, easy to use, and it's not just for games. I've been searching for concert tickets, comedy shows, right? How How have you been using Game Time?
I was looking through it last night. They have tickets to all kinds of stuff. Obviously, they've got all the sporting events, but they have the monster trucks that they do at the Heritage Bank Center here. Tickets for that extremely cheap. So, and they had something else as well that I was looking at. Definitely concerts and comedy stuff. There's all kinds of stand-ups that I think are pretty good value at this point.
I love how easy it is to use. You just click a toggle, you get the all-in pricing, you just toggle that feature, it shows the total up front. There's no surprise fees at checkout. That is fantastic. I love the panoramic view of the seats, so you know exactly what you're getting. They also have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. In Game Time's ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHECKTHEMIC, and you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CHECKTHEMIC, CHECKTHEMIC. Get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Let's go Philadelphia Eagles 28, New York Giants 3. Eagles move to 4-2. Giants fall to 2-5. The Saquon Barkley game here.
Revenge game.
The revenge game. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much all we need to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, Saquon Barkley had more yardage than the Giants.
Sure did.
And really, from the outset, you could tell the game was kind of going to go that way. They gave him the ball very early. I think it was the dump off in the flat. And he immediately, lowers his shoulder and just trucks a Giants defender. And you're like, Saquon Barkley has come to play in this game. He had a couple of other
187 to 119. Oh, here he is. Look at
boom. I think that was one of the first plays of the game was that, and he's out there just on a mission in this game. Whether it was catching the ball, whether it was running it, he had a few massive plays in this game, and was absolutely a huge part of it. And then the other side, the other thing that determined this game is the Giants without Andrew Thomas just couldn't block the Eagles. I mean, it was 8 sacks I think in the end. Most of which came in the first half, and that's just not a viable offense.
Yeah, Daniel Jones was sacked 7 times. He was only pressured 15 times. So it was one of those, it was about, half of his dropbacks that he's pressured on, which is high, and then half of those dropbacks ended up in sacks. So it's all bad. The pass protection wasn't good in the general dropback passing game, and when there was pressure, it wasn't like Daniel Jones was saving the pressure. He was running into sacks, getting sacked a few different times by different people, right? Sometimes it was, backup left tackle caving in. It was backs. It was everybody. The Saquon thing is fascinating because we've talked about running backs a ton. And so I don't know how do you think about this from a Giants perspective, because it's not like Saquon Barkley was carrying this incredible Giants offense for 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden they just, we're just going to get younger and let him walk. And he's doing the same thing with the Eagles. It's more so when you add a good running back to an offense that already has these other pieces,
yeah,
they could be great. And they can add value to that offense. But, I mean, if you put Saquon on the Giants right now,
yeah,
I don't think this is Saquon had 187 and the Giants you just flip the script and the Giants win this one 28-3. It just doesn't work that way if that's what people are thinking.
That's the difference, right? It's what is a running back capable of doing in today's NFL? He's not capable of coming in and just fixing a bad situation, right? You can't just take a running back there'll be a guy, one of the best prospects to come along in a long time this year, right? Oh, our offense is terrible. What if we draft a running back in the top 5? Right? No, that's not going to fix it. All you're going to do is put a running back that you draft in the top 5 that's one of the best prospects ever in a crappy situation, and he's not going to be able to fix it by himself. Now, if you take that guy and put him on an offense that's already fine, an offensive line that's in good shape, a passing game that can function, he can absolutely, add incredible value and make it a different dynamic within that offense. And that's what happened in Philadelphia. They took a guy that could not just carry the entire offense by himself and fix a bad offensive line and, make a passing game function. But he can step onto a team that's already fine and definitely make the difference between, normal running backs and Saquon Barkley. And that's what you're seeing.
Saquon, I mean, when you look at, teams against the run too, like it's not like every run goes for 10 yards. When you average 10 yards a carry, like the Giants were doing a pretty good job early on. They're bottling up Saquon, and then he gets to the edge and breaks one for 55. And what I think Saquon has really done this year with his big play ability is he makes you pay for bad gap discipline from a defensive perspective. He makes you pay for bad angles, and then when he has the numbers advantage, he can create those big plays. So he has a 55-yard run, a 38-yard run, and a 41-yard run. 3 massive plays. And this has been pretty consistent for Saquon Barkley. And look, I think it's a massive addition to the Eagles offense because they also have A.J. Brown, who had, when this game was close, it's 4th and 3, and A.J. Brown just unbelievable, uncoverable, right? He has the long 41-yard touchdown on 4th and 3. That put the Eagles up. That was their second touchdown. Going back to the old Titans days when A.J. Brown was there and Derrick Henry was there, and they just had these games where it's like, look, they're just going to be better than you on a handful of plays per game, and that might be the difference. That's what this game felt like. There was like just 4 plays of A.J. Brown going for a 40-yard touchdown and Saquon going for 55, 38, and 41, and it's like the Giants, those 4 plays alone were way more than what the Giants were able to produce.
That was a huge play, that A.J. Brown shot play. I mean, that was 4th and 3.
It was 7-3 at the time?
Yeah, it was a close game at that
7-0
point.
at the time, sorry.
It was a close game at that point. It was 4th and 3, and the Giants were basically playing, well, of course it's going to be a short pass, you know?
Yeah.
And A.J. Brown was like, you've left, or the Eagles were like, you've left A.J. Brown one-on-one on the outside. We're taking a shot at that. Like, we are. It might be 4th and 3. It might be gotta have it time, but that's too good an opportunity to pass up. And they just took the ISO shot to A.J. Brown. He absolutely wrecked the Giants defender, and that's a touchdown. Like, the Giants were that close to forcing the Eagles off the field, getting good field position, and instead they give up another score. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's a huge swing.
I'm still trying to figure out what the Eagles are. I mean, Hurts didn't have to throw the ball a ton. You have that pretty low percentage pass to A.J. Brown, but an absolute dime by Hurts. And Brown is, I mean, A.J.'s so good at just making sure that he's stacking the corner and making the catch. Did that the previous week. The high-end potential for the Eagles is still there. I'm curious to see if they can unlock it. They come to Cincinnati this week. Should be a great matchup against the Bengals. Other story coming out of New York here, early 4th quarter, Daniel Jones comes out of the game. Drew Lock replaces him. Call it a benching, call it a spark or whatever. But there was a little QB controversy coming out of training camp. There were at least rumblings that Drew Lock could get a chance to start over Daniel Jones. Jones got sacked 7 times, as we mentioned, only 99 passing yards. Are they actually going to look to Drew Lock here?
Maybe. I mean, I don't see that that's going to fix anything. Like,
no, I don't think so either. I'm just curious if
I do.
They're going to make a move.
Daniel Jones does make a bad offensive line look worse. I mean, we saw that last year. His tendencies. I mean,
he got sacked 10 times against Seattle last year.
Yeah,
and every single one, it's like, man, you were under a lot of pressure, but you're turning what maybe should have been 5 sacks into 10.
Yeah, like he pours gas on the fire. So Andrew Thomas being out for the year, that's going to be a continual problem for that offensive line going forward. And Daniel Jones is probably the worst quarterback you have for that dynamic. I don't know that Drew Lock is going to be significantly better, but like this, Daniel Jones had a few games this year where he'd played quite well, or had looked like he was turning a corner. All of that's probably off the table with the way that offensive line is now.
Just reading through our friend Pat Leonard just tweeting through what actually happened there. Brian Daboll abruptly benched. This is Pat Leonard. Brian Daboll abruptly benched Daniel Jones on Sunday. A ripcord that demonstrates a last gasp from a head coach on the ropes. Quote, "It wasn't much of a conversation." Jones just said he was going to go with Drew, looking for a spark. That was about it. End quote. So a lot of questions in New York about Brian Daboll, about Joe Shane, the general manager.
Oh, man, can you just
I'm just saying, you cannot sit there. Joe, come on. We could have had the 176 yards of Saquon on our side. 187 yards.
If you watch that Hard Knocks offseason with the New York Giants and saw how sad John Mara was about Saquon Barkley no longer going to be playing with the team, and Joe Shane sitting there with that little, smirk on his face, like, John, these are the things you got to do to build a good football team. And then they go and Saquon like single-handedly basically wrecks shop against the Giants, destroys them, puts up more yardage than the entire Giants offense. You've got the other like Mara relative sitting there going, I don't know what our offensive identity is going to be without Saquon. Like who are we going to turn to, you know? And Shane and the other people, like the football people in the building, are sort of like, you know, oh, you guys, like, that's such a toxic dynamic now. You got made look like a moron by that guy, and they were already on that side of the fence.
I mean, look.
Not a good weekend for Joe Shane. That's all I'm saying.
Joe Shane's been there 3 years, and if you want to look at it in its totality, year one, the Giants accidentally made the playoffs in a rebuilding year.
Accidentally.
Yes. Fake success. The roster's in a similar spot now as it was then. It's probably worse when you start thinking about, oh, well, Leonard Williams isn't here, Julian Love. I mean, they're missing some key players. So, yeah, you can make the argument that in totality, the Giants are not much better off now than they were 3 years ago. But the Saquon Barkley move is not the one to hang your hat on.
Were these the things
to say, well, Joe Shane just, not doing the job. He let Saquon. It's actually great football saying, I've got Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary both replacing Saquon here. The problem is the other pieces. The other thing I'll say about the job Joe Shane's done, and it's awesome that we got that insight into Hard Knocks, because it's not just there are reports that the Giants may have wanted to trade up for Drake May. It's beyond that. We know they were doing everything they could to trade up for a quarterback in the draft. They acknowledge their issue with Daniel Jones, that they needed a quarterback. And if all they needed was the Patriots to say yes, and they have Drake May, and they at least have some hope here. They at least have, hey, Drake May, we got someone to build around. We got to shore up the line a little bit more, get him another playmaker. They wouldn't have Malik Neighbors, though, right? But they'd at least have something to build around there.
Smartest person from that series, by the way, is appearing to be Joe Shane's son, young son. I don't know how old he was, like teenage son, who, when asked who he wanted the Giants to pick, said Jaden Daniels. Go make it happen. He was like, you only get this job once. You only get one shot at this. You want that guy.
It's pretty good.
Joe Shane's son is looking like a genius after that.
Hire him. Anything else on this game?
No.
All right, let's go. Next two 1 o'clock games. Really,
here we go.
Really fun. The NFC North. Green Bay Packers 24, Houston Texans 22. Packers with a huge win. They move to 5-2. Texans fall to 5-2. Packers win with a game-winning field goal with no time left for the 2-point win. I went in detail, play by play. I've got a lot of
play by play.
I mean,
we're going to break this down play by play.
I'm going to go through every play. I went through the Packers defense very closely, at least the pass game, because C.J. Stroud finished 10 of 21 for 86 yards.
Yeah.
Sacked 4 times.
Finished with an Anthony Richardson stat line.
I mean, maybe worse. It was the second worst EPA per play for the Texans passing offense of C.J. Stroud's career, of the Stroud-Slowick era. Second to last year against the Jets in the rain, which, by the way, I forgot, that was the last time a Jets quarterback threw for 300 yards, by the way. Zach Wilson last year in that game. So I want to talk about that. Let me get your instant reaction or initial reaction to this game, but I really want to rave about the Packers defense for a little bit after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Like, this was supposed to be, the battle of these two young quarterbacks, what these offenses could do, these sort of both Shanahan-ish derivative offenses. And actually, Green Bay's defense was the story. Like, they had C.J. Stroud and that Texans offense in an absolute bind all the way through the game, and it really was the difference.
So I went through I'm just watching all of C.J. Stroud's dropbacks, and this is how I generally find stats, Sam. Like, I make some observations from film, and then go and be like, wait, it feels like I'm seeing this. Can I confirm this with the numbers?
Right.
So I'm going through the film, and I'm just like, every single third down, C.J. Stroud's under pressure. And not only under pressure, but like unblocked pressure. The Texans pass protection. So from a Texans point of view, the pass protection was awful. But this was the stat that I found here. C.J. Stroud dropped back 14 times on third down. He was pressured 12 times on 14 third down dropbacks. And it was the line, it was unblocked rushers, it was the backs and the tight ends were awful and pass protection too. But I wanted like Jeff Hafley just did a great job, Packers defensive coordinator, and I know Packers fans have been begging for this. He was doing a lot of the stuff that we rave about Brian Flores for, right? Crowding the line of scrimmage. They sacked or created pressure on C.J. Stroud, the same exact pressure that they used, or very similar pressure that they used on Sam Darnold a couple weeks ago, where they had the double A gap look, but they also had there was a tight split from the receiver, so the corner is closer to the line of scrimmage, and they blitz him off the edge. Texans didn't have an answer for that. C.J. Stroud gets popped. They had Kingsley Enagbare, who's a defensive lineman, running free multiple times. That's just like Laramie Tunsil falling asleep, not picking him up. It was bad across the board from a Texans point of view, and incredibly impressive from a defensive point of view for the Packers, because they were creating pressure schematically and just out-dueling Houston. In every single third down, Stroud was under pressure. And he finished 1 for 5, sacked 3 times, scrambled a couple times. One of them was good. One of them was for a first down. And he had 2 incompletions that were negated by penalty. No success whatsoever on third down.
Except that one, the one
until,
that he got.
until the one at the end. That was the one completion. And even that, I think that came after the Packers jumped off sides and kind of like set them up for a was that the one? Yeah, it was a 3rd and 11. That one play that Stroud had, which was outstanding, right? He's had a few of those this year.
Yeah.
To convert and maybe at the time seemingly save the game.
And even that one had like insta pressure with a free blocker or a free rusher, coming off the edge. He escapes that, gets outside, hits a beautiful pass to Xavier Hutchinson on the sideline. Like this is again like terrible sort of overall production, performance, etc. It's not a game where you come away remotely that impressed by C.J. Stroud because everything was bad for the Texans offense. But this is why, you're not just like, he's just not the guy, right? Because he'd been getting beat up. They'd been in a blender the entire game. And then 3rd and 10, really key point where the game is still on the line. That's when he finds a really money play and sets them up for a go-ahead field goal. Like he still is able to take an entire game of getting his ass kicked and then show up for a huge play like that.
I mean, sometimes I just like reading my notes. Can I just read my notes?
Sure.
What did we see here? The Packers had a play where they were moving Rashawn Gary pre-snap. I don't know if this was by design, but he's like moving and he's just ends up at linebacker on the particular play, and he comes through unblocked. They looked like they were trying to realign him. I don't know if it was by design, but he comes in unblocked. So again, I think from a Houston perspective, we've talked a lot about this year where teams have not done a great job with twists, stunts, any sort of gap exchanges up front and overload blitz looks. Houston was awful at picking these up, and the Packers were great at creating them in this game. When they did work play action, Houston, things were covered, right? Big dig route, tight window. It looked like the Packers were slow playing the run. They did give up a little bit on the ground in this game. It looked like they were slow playing the run, taking away the play action concepts really well. So their third down package was fantastic. They did a nice job taking away the play action shot plays that Houston likes to make. When they faked the blitz, right, they dropped out on third downs. That Stroud was just off on one or two throws doing that, like everything they did. There was also a sequence where Stroud scrambled on 3 straight dropbacks. And this was my concern with Stroud last year, because he's pretty good creating outside of structure, way better than we had anticipated coming out of college at Ohio State. And he had an awesome scramble for a first down, but also like he is much better when he's sitting there going through progressions and working from a pocket. I don't want him playing like a Mahomes outside of structure. 3 straight scrambles on dropbacks. Like Stroud started to not trust his pass protection and his receivers. So it's just something to keep an eye on from C.J. Stroud in particular, from the Texans' pass protection in particular, and then from a Packers perspective, I think they showed they could play championship caliber defense against a really good offense. And just this game itself bodes really well for what Green Bay can do down the road.
It is wild how quickly things change in the NFL. Like last season, the closest Shanahan derivative offenses were 1, 2, 3 in yards per attempt, right? Like Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, C.J. Stroud and Bobby Slowick, and then Tua and Mike McDaniel, right? And okay, Tua's been concussed, he's been out, so the McDaniel one is sort of off the table. But it was like the Shanahan offense was cooking every defensive scheme in the NFL. And then the one scheme that was causing it any kind of problems was that Brian Flores defense in Minnesota, which seemed to have the number of Kyle Shanahan in particular. Now, we've talked about, you had the Vic Fangio systems on defense were in vogue, and that was the meta system. And then all of a sudden now we're seeing Flores defense, Mike McDonald's defense, like the different scheme base as maybe the meta defensive scheme right now.
Yep.
And that's the one that seems tailor-made, or those are the family that are sort of tailor-made to really screw up the Shanahan offense. And I don't know if that's by design, like teams are specifically trying to find ways of combating that specific offense because that's the one that's breaking the NFL. But all of a sudden, like we might go from, if you don't have a Shanahan like disciple as your coach on offense, you're in trouble because that's the one that's just so far ahead of everything else. In 12 months, we might suddenly be like, that's the one that can't handle this defensive scheme. And every time they run up against one of those defenses, they don't have the same success.
It's interesting, too, because I think offensive coaches are more tied to their system.
Right.
And defensive coaches can adjust because this wasn't necessarily Hafley's game coming. You know what I mean? Like defensive coaches, they're not, hey, this guy's a Tampa 2 coach, this guy's a Seattle cover 3 coach. That's less prevalent on the defensive side of the ball. It still exists, but you can morph on defense a lot easier. Like Raheem Morris has run every type of scheme throughout his career. Offensively, though, it's harder to adjust and come out of the tree, so to speak.
And it's also where I think having the guy, the original sort of architect of that scheme is an advantage. Like Kyle has already shown repeatedly he's able to evolve and change that offense and add elements and, adjust it. Whereas now the guys that left and are on their own, McDaniel, Bobby Slowick, et cetera, those guys are, okay, now you have to come up with those answers independently on your own. Can you do that? That's the task facing all those guys right now.
On the other side of the ball, I just wanted to highlight the fun stats here. Jordan Love, as of right now, because Baker Mayfield hasn't played football, but Jordan Love currently tied for the league lead with 15 passing touchdowns and also leads the league with 8 interceptions. And Jordan Love's missed 2 football games.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. It's not all on him. He's had some weird turnover luck. It's not perfectly synchronized with his turnover-worthy plays or anything like that. But interesting dynamic. Makes me think, I wonder, I'm not going to look this up. I don't know how to do it quickly. I wonder which quarterback has the highest percentage. It's got to be Jameis, right? Yeah. Highest percentage of touchdowns or interceptions as a percentage of his total passes.
Definitely Jameis.
Right?
Or Fitzpatrick. It's that class of quarterback.
Because it's like the big-time throw. It doesn't even show in his big-time throw turnover-worthy play ratio. It's not that level where it literally is like he's just making a whole bunch of special throws and boneheaded decisions. It's just kind of like.
But he is playing. I mean, he's just hyper-aggressive right now. I mean, you saw it in this game. He had a really bad forced throw interception on the first drive, I think. Could easily have been pick sixth.
Really quick, want to highlight that. Like the Texans had 2 drives start at the Green Bay 11.
Yeah.
Just to highlight the field position and why it was even this close.
This is a game that came down to single-digit points. That drive, I think. So bad forced throw interception by Jordan Love. Almost got pick six, set the Texans up. Tank Dell drops a touchdown, like in the end zone. They had to settle for 3 on that drive. Could have been 7. Should have been 7.
Yes.
Tank Dell drops in the end zone. And that ends up, like, that's more than the difference in the game.
Yeah, that was one of Stroud's best passes, actually. Yep.
But you have that Jordan Love bad interception, just trying to force too much. But then you also have the Tucker Kraft touchdown.
Beautiful.
Where that, like, sails inches past the hands of a defender who's right underneath it. Like, that's the kind of margin he's playing with right now. Like, he is threading a needle with half of these pass attempts where he's like, it's either going to be amazing or I'm going to look like an idiot trying to force this through a gap that probably isn't there.
He did have a couple of the big-time throws. Touchdown to Dontavian Wicks was beautiful.
Yep.
Had another pass drop down the field. Look, Love is a little volatile right now. The results are definitely volatile, but again, the Green Bay this year has the defense to rely on in spots like this to step up, and I think that makes them more dangerous now than it did before.
Oh, a lot more. I mean, they're in that groove right now where they're looking like one of the best teams in the league again, like last year, where they kind of hit the ground running or at midway, and were just a juggernaut from that point on. Couple of other things to mention. Josh Jacobs had his first receiving touchdown of his career. That was this streak.
That was the stat. I was
211 straight catches without a touchdown, which was an NFL all-time record, like 6 years.
I didn't realize that at all. And remember when he came out, he made that back shoulder catch that you and I, we were watching film together, right? We're watching Josh, like, what he's making. He looks like Julio Jones over there wearing number 8, right? For Bama, making this catch. Great receiver. And he's been a pretty good receiver in his career. It's just funny he hasn't found the end zone.
It's crazy. Just such a weird quirk that was, literally an all-time
Have
NFL
we been
record.
like sometimes those stats come up, like Scott Hansen was like right on top of it. Have we been waiting for this?
Like this year in particular, obviously it's been there for a while. But it was like every now and again you get these streak stats where somebody remembers or notices it, and then that's like now everybody's watching for that, right? I think this year that got flagged somewhere quite early, and it was like, all right, Josh Jacobs still somehow hasn't hit the end zone as a receiver, and then every week it's been like, oh, there's another 5 catches with no touchdown. Anyway, finally got in the end zone. The other thing that struck me as interesting with this game, so this was one of those ones where before the game there was like a little scuffle, a little pre-match rumble. Stephon Diggs, obviously, front and center, single-handedly taking on the entire Green Bay roster, right? He got into it, I think, with Jair Alexander, and then basically tried to single-handedly start a fight on his own. Players have been ejected for less than the contact that Stephon Diggs made on an official who was trying to walk him away from the fight, right? Like a guy who was walking him back, and at some point, Diggs did this thing of like swatted down the guy's hands as like, get the hell off me type of thing, right? Harrison Smith is one that jumps to mind as a guy who got ejected for basically doing that exact thing. That was during a game. I meant to ask if we could get Dean's explanation for.
Should we get Dean on Wednesday?
Well,
we have enough to
not
talk
even
about?
that. What are the protocols for? Because people have been. That's happened before, right? A pre-game like scuffle has caused guys to get into trouble. Like
Probably, yeah.
because contact with an official is supposed to be an immediate ejection, right? And that's happened for like negligible, like accidental contact, let alone deliberate, like swatting of a hands away and saying, "Get the hell off me." Like this, we could have been going into this game with Diggs ejected before the game even started, is what I'm saying.
It's always a little volatile over there.
Yeah.
That's good. Him and Jair are fun. A fun matchup. Reunion of sorts.
A reunion.
From the Vikings days, right? With Jair. Anything else? I'm just so impressed by Green Bay, their defense.
Yeah.
And again, I like to always look at what are teams capable of. Because I'm a huge fan of the Texans this year as well.
Yeah.
But Green Bay took it to them. Could be a Super Bowl preview, this matchup down the road. But I thought Green Bay was just so impressive, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I can't get over the fact that on 14 third down dropbacks, Green Bay created pressure 12 times and, shut down the Texans.
I mean, when you consider their losses this season, Green Bay, right? They lose in Brazil in a close game where their quarterback gets hurt.
On an ice skating rink.
Right. And they lose to the Minnesota Vikings in a game where, okay, they got blown out early, but they then came back and made it a close game, and the Vikings were undefeated until yesterday, right? So their 2 losses are against 2 other teams that are expected to be contenders, one of which they lost their quarterback in. They won 2 games with Malik Willis as their quarterback, and, I mean, they look really good. They're good on both sides of the ball. They're young, talented. Their ceiling is sky high. They're absolutely a team to be taken seriously.
Also looking very good, the other 2 NFC North teams. Only one team could win, though. Detroit Lions 31, Minnesota Vikings 29. Both teams 5-1 now. Awesome back and forth game here. Lions kicked the game-winning field goal with 15 seconds left, 44-yarder. Both feel like the Lions, depends on the perspective here. Lions made a few mistakes. I thought that aided the Vikings, brought them back in. David Montgomery, Vikings earned
Well, they
it
blew
too.
an 11-point lead twice.
Yes. But even just like the beginning, you have a fake punt that goes awry, and then the Vikings get up early.
I mean, yeah, didn't go awry. The Vikings just stuffed it.
Okay, however you want to say it.
But that's this is part of the Lions, right? The Dan Campbell aggression. They are prone to doing that type of thing. And most of the time it works out in their favor, but every now and again it doesn't. I mean, this game started the way every other Vikings game has gone, right? They got ahead early. The 2nd and 17, I think, on the first drive, they got a big negative play. 2nd and 17, there was a complete breakdown in coverage for the Lions. Vikings get a sack. Now it's 3rd and 26. The Vikings defense plays soft. They actually give up most of that, and that's why the Lions were like, oh, let's go for the fake punt. Let's try and keep this drive alive. They don't get it. The Vikings get really good field position. Aaron Jones gets an immediate touchdown, barely touched. It's going to really test the hamstring, by the way. Guy coming back off a hamstring injury. Immediate, open it up, full throttle, sprint to the end zone. And then, so the Vikings are immediately, set up with an early lead again. And then the difference is they gave it up this time. And they go, when the Lions took the lead, that was only the 7th snap this season that Minnesota has trailed in a game. They basically been leading every game because of the way they start. They started that way again, but this is the first team that was like, nope, we're going to come back. We're not just letting you walk off into the distance.
It was a fun back and forth game, man. I mean, we talked about coming in the stats that Jared Goff had against Brian Flores' blitz. You made the point on the instant reaction show last night. Was it so much blitz answers as just Goff making some huge throws? I don't know where the PFF grade ends up for Jared Goff because he did fumble twice, subtly fumbled twice, and the ball bounced right back to him. That's gonna hurt him a little bit. But when he threw the football, he was outstanding.
The Vikings have had, despite having this insane, points differential this season and being undefeated until this game, and every game sort of following the same script, they get out ahead early. They tended to walk away from teams. A couple pegged it back. They've also had a bunch of these plays, massive high leverage plays within games that haven't always gone their way. Same thing in this game. There was this wild fumble where Harrison Phillips ripped the ball from Tim Patrick, where Tim Patrick was lying on Phillips at the time. And so the Vikings challenged this. They didn't give it at the time. They called him down. The Vikings challenged it. We're he's not down. He's literally lying on the defensive tackle that's ripping the ball from him. They didn't get given that one. Then, as you said, twice the Vikings' pressure actually did work and get to Jared Goff. And on both occasions, the ball just bounced back, right?
Right back to him, yeah.
One occasion, strip sack from behind, blindside, classic hit. It literally just bounces off the floor and lands right back in Jared Goff's hands as he hits the turf. That's a massive leverage swing play if it goes the other way. And then the other one was another pressure. Goff tries to get out of it. Goes almost full Will Levis, just pitches it backwards. And there's 3 offensive linemen over there who just fall on it. Those are 2 huge leverage plays so amazing chess match between Ben Johnson, the Lions offense coordinator, Brian Flores, the kind of architect of this defense is killing everybody. And those were 2 plays where Flores wins and gets nothing for it because the ball bounces back to the other team.
Yes. I mean, I thought so. There was a little bit of fumble luck there. I would say Goff, when he threw the ball, like I said, was outstanding. Last year, we talked about the blitz and Goff, 55 blitzes, and Goff came back with almost 500 passing yards just against the blitz, against Flores. In this game, we might have slightly different numbers. I mean, what I saw, Goff against the blitz was 14 of 16 for 149, touchdown and a sack in this one. Next Gen Stats has Goff under pressure, 51% of his dropbacks against the Vikings. So blitz.
That's the play.
Blitz is a play call. When we use the words, right? Blitz is a play call.
Yeah.
Did you send an unexpected rusher, right? That's a blitz. Pressure is you actually got there and affected the quarterback. So by Next Gen, 51% of his dropbacks, and he was 10 of 11 for 164, 2 touchdowns when pressured. Goff was making some huge throws, including hitting co-worker Amon-Ra St. Brown a bunch, but particularly on the game-winning drive to help set up the game-winning field goal.
So this was the thing. I think overall, Ben Johnson, I think, does have better answers to this Flores defense than any other offensive mind in the game currently, right? He certainly did a better job of this than any of the Shanahan derivatives where Flores has had them just wrecked. But I do think that the biggest differentiator here was not actually Ben Johnson and his answers. It was Jared Goff just playing out of his mind in situations that typically quarterbacks do not play well in. This reminded me of Jared Goff. You remember his Cal games where like that offensive line was garbage and he's just getting torched and he's just standing there tall in a pocket getting blitzed by people and he's just standing there delivering a pass anyway, deep down the field, touchdown, right? Like every play is Jared Goff getting lit up
a lot
and just delivering it anyway, right?
Yes.
And just standing there and going, I don't care. I'm going to stare down the barrel of this gun and fire the ball and score a touchdown over the top of this pressure. That was what was happening in this game. Like the pressure schemes and what Flores was sending, it was working a large part. But it
Taylor Decker against Jonathan Grenard. Grenard won a lot.
Grenard was inches away from like 3 or 4 game-changing plays, right? Yep. He has one where he swipes. He's like getting the classic sort of round the corner strip sack, bats on the quarterback's throwing arm, and somehow it just didn't affect it. And Goff just doesn't care. Just shuffles up a foot and delivers the pass. You're like, that was normally a quarterback when he feels the contact on this arm, panics, right? It's like pulls the ball, runs, tries to get out of it. Goff just like takes a step forward and delivers a pass anyway. So against pressure, according to PFF's numbers, Goff was 11 of 13 for 156 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions, which is 12 yards per attempt and a passer rating of 142.3. Generally speaking, when quarterbacks get pressure, their passer rating drops 30 to 35 points, and that's why pressure is an important thing in and of itself. Goff simply had one of the best games of all time in the face of pressure. And yeah, Ben Johnson had some answers. The Vikings defense also had some bad plays, like, Stephon Gilmore just fell over on one play, and then they had a walk-in touchdown because of it. But God, Jared Goff had a game where it's like, if your quarterback is going to do that in the face of pressure, there is no defense in the world that can stop that. Like, there just isn't. That is a genuine cheat code. It is I have the skeleton key to whatever lock you're going to throw at me. It's unstoppable. Jared Goff had an unstoppable good performance against the Vikings, and that's now his second or third consecutively. And the Lions, remember, I think it was after week 2, maybe week 3, we were like, the Lions are looking really good, and Jared Goff's kind of played pretty bad. What happens if he starts to play really well?
Yeah.
That's what's happening right now. Jared Goff is now playing out of his mind, and everything else is still where it is, except Aiden Hutchinson.
There are some hidden plays. I mean, the stats are ridiculous. There are some hidden plays that make it a little bit worse than the stats would show, but 84% completion percentage since week 4, 7 touchdowns, no picks, 154 passer rating since week 4, and number 1 in EPA per dropback, Jared Goff. All per 33rd team. Thank you for those stats. Appreciate it. I've got also the most Detroit Lions stat of all time.
Oh, yeah?
I had to look into this. So Jahmyr Gibbs has 2 rushing touchdowns. The first one, 45 yards, right? I mean, I cannot rave about the Lions offense enough every single week. My guy, Jameson Williams, I liked his receiving yard projection. He had -4 yards. It's fine. It's
great.
fine. I can lose once. It's
Sure.
okay. -4 yards in this game. Didn't matter. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 7 first downs. He was unbelievable. Jahmyr Gibbs created his big plays, but he has a 45-yard touchdown. His second touchdown was for 8 yards in the red zone on 3rd and 7. And so I had to look this up because the Lions just ran it up the middle. So the most Lions stat of all time, I had to be a little specific with this, but I brought this up last year. It's 3rd or 4th down with 4. I used the filter for our friends at PFF. 3rd down or 4th down with 4 to 8 yards to go. So it's a clear pass situation. And I wanted to know
how often they run.
Not how often they run, but how successful.
Okay.
Right? Who's got the most first downs on 3rd or 4th down, 4 to 8 yards to go. Over the last 2 years, David Montgomery has 6 first downs in those situations. Number 1 in the NFL. Number 2 in the NFL is Jahmyr Gibbs with 4, tied with Alvin Kamara. The Lions have 12 of those as a team. I took out QB scrambles and everything, right? It's just running back runs. Let's call this disrespectful runs, right? It's 3rd and long-ish. You should not be running the football. And it's not even these like draw plays. They're just like, we're going to run inside zone. We're going to run outside. We're just going to run a normal run play. They did it last year against the Chargers on 4th and 6.
Yeah.
Remember with Montgomery? That was what made me first think of this. Lions have 12 of these over the last 2 years, and no team has more than 7. Disrespectful runs. Conversion down, 4 to 8 yards to go. I could have expanded it, maybe even made it higher. In Lions, 0.86 EPA per play on those plays. And of all the things that the Lions do that seems backwards, it's either, depending on how you look at it, it's either backwards or it's forward thinking. And Greg Olsen, every time he does a Lions game, says this is forward thinking. They run on 3rd and long because they're going to go for it on 4th down. And then what you're actually doing is creating this advantage. In this particular play against the Vikings have no linebackers, right? Because they're all walked up. And it's kind of like when you just make one block, hit the seam, and it's there's no help, and they ran it in for a touchdown. I just thought it was fascinating because the Lions do a lot of things unique to other teams around the league, and this is one of them. And we're just going to straight run the ball in must-pass situations and have more success than everyone else.
Yeah, they do that. Their propensity to run the ball in passing situations, even on those do or die plays, like those 4th downs, where it's like you don't have 2 shots at this. You need to pick it up now. Their willingness to run the ball with like 4+ yards is kind of crazy.
Do you remember the play last year? That was when I first brought it up on the podcast. I was like, they just ran outside zone on 4th and 6.
Yeah.
And they got it. Like they owned the line of scrimmage and got it. I've never seen play calls like that, but they work.
One more stat I wanted to bring up to highlight the Jared Goff thing. The other reason it felt like they were just killing this defense is every 3rd down they were doing it, right? So Jared Goff passing on 3rd down, 5 for 5, 76 yards and a touchdown, 15.2 yards per attempt. 4 of those 5 plays were pressured. So again, Flores was getting, like, the scheme was working. It's not like the Lions just had like, oh, we got this shut down. Last year, it did feel like late in the season, the Lions just had it, like the Flores defense couldn't do anything. They had the answers. They had the code. It was different this year. Like Flores' stuff was working. It's just that Goff invalidated all of it by finding the plays. And they weren't necessarily wide open plays that had answers. Some of them were. Like they had a wide open guy against 0 blitz. There were some plays where Ben Johnson had answers. But I really think that the key difference in this game was Jared Goff playing out of his mind.
So he was outstanding. I also want to highlight on the other side, first off. Really quick. Brian Branch is awesome.
Yes.
Another week. Brian Branch is awesome. He almost had a fumble recovery for a touchdown, ruled out of bounds, but he keeps making plays, had an interception.
That was so much closer than it looked from the first angle.
Yeah.
Like they showed the angle from like the right-hand side of the receiver. It's like, oh, he clearly stepped out of bounds. And then you see the other side where you see the actual sideline. Most of his foot is in the air. Like barely a cleat is touching out of bounds.
Yeah.
The foot is like hanging over the side, just about out of bounds.
I want to highlight Sam Darnold on the other side too. I mean, he finishes 22 of 27 for 259. Had the bad interception to Brian Branch. Also had a touchdown. A few big-time throws in there. Unbelievable downfield throw to Jordan Addison for 51 yards in this comeback attempt. And I don't want to fall into this. It's easy to fall into this pattern, Sam, where when the team wins, we just talk all good about the winning team and all bad about the losing team. Like we've said in other games, Sam Darnold, he didn't really play up to par, and they still won. I thought he was really good in this game. It made some huge throws in this comeback attempt when they needed him.
I mean, at one point in this game, probably the first time the Lions were 11 points clear, I was like, okay, this has exposed the Vikings as a sort of potential fraud. I was readying the meme, right? The phone call potential fraud alert, and then the Vikings logo. I was like readying the tweet, right? But I actually was quite impressed by how they came back multiple times in this game. I think the better team won. Like I think the Lions did deserve this win, particularly because Jared Goff playing that way. But yeah, I think the Vikings actually. They showed that they are for real. Like this was not, they haven't been undefeated by fluke. They were impressive coming back multiple times in this game. And, they could have snatched it at the end. Like the way it went, they just didn't have enough time on the clock. But if they'd had a bit more time, if that last drive hadn't been 15 seconds, but had been twice that, 30 seconds, I would have said they had a pretty good shot of moving the ball into field goal range in 30-something seconds.
So look, 31-29 is the final. One other thing I thought was interesting at the end, the Lions took a knee multiple times to set up the 44-yard game-winning field goal.
Yeah.
Were they worried because they let the Vikings back in, depending on your perspective. The Vikings earned it by forcing the fumble, but when it was 28-23 Lions, David Montgomery fumbles, gets recovered, brought back for a touchdown by Ivan Pace. That gave the Vikings the lead, 29-28. Was Dan Campbell just saying, we're not fumbling again? Because they stopped running plays and they settled-ish for a 44-yard field goal, actually lost a little bit of ground on the kneels rather than trying to run the ball. Again, the Lions do a lot of unique stuff. Extreme end of fourth down conversions, punt fakes, runs on third and fourth down when it's third and long. All these things that we're mentioning, is this another one of those where they just said, we're not taking any chances here? Because they wanted to run the clock, but they could have run even more clock too.
Yeah.
Because they kicked it with 19 seconds left. If they ran the ball for 1 or 2 yards on each of those plays and didn't fumble, it would be a walk-off field goal.
Right.
And they left a little bit of time, and they also said, okay, we're going to make sure we don't fumble. I just thought that was interesting from a game management standpoint.
And could potentially have picked up a first down by running it. Like, could have just ended it.
Well, they needed to kick the field goal to win it.
No, but got themselves, taking all the time off the clock, and by getting the first down, put themselves in
Yeah, I mean, they were
position.
probably going to run the clock anyway.
And we mentioned this before, but it is worth re-emphasizing. Jonathan Grenard in this game was phenomenal. He's only going to end up with 1 sack, but he was so good. I mean, he was destroying Taylor Decker, who's a good offensive tackle, repeatedly. Almost had a strip sack, right? And then was so close to a couple of other massive plays as well.
Yeah, the Vikings were creating their unblocked pressure and just winning reps, winning one-on-ones, which they don't always do, right? They're not a great man-for-man pass rush team. They're better than they were, but a lot of it's the scheme. They were actually winning their one-on-one. So this was a little backwards, because if you told me Grenard's going to have that type of game, I'd say Lions are going to struggle.
Right.
But yeah, to your point, Goff made up a lot of big throws.
First game for the Lions without Aiden Hutchinson. I would say they platooned for pressure reasonably well, but a lot of that was going up the middle against Garrett Bradbury, which is not going to be a repeatable feat against a lot of teams. So we're still sort of TBD how that's going to pan out.
Still one of those games, if Hutchinson was there, you'd have 7 or 8 from him,
absolutely,
and a bunch of other guys with 2 or 3.
Right.
I do wonder if that's going to come back to bite. Also, my boy Terrion Arnold, man, you got to crack replace on that Aaron Jones touchdown, man. Just let it see the crack block. You got to replace him. He got sucked in. Aaron Jones just walking in for 45 yards or whatever it was. Come on, man.
Blown contained.
Arnold thought he was going to be a good run defender at the NFL level. Anything else on this one?
Nope.
All right, the show is brought to you by Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. So you've been following along. Sam still has his lineup alive.
Still alive.
Yep, for tonight. I lost this week, but I was on a nice little run. The last few weeks. But you guys could join as well. We've enjoyed playing it. It's the best way to get on the action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. You get the old flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money, even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, which we've needed here, so your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. So download the app today. Use the code CHECKTHEMIC. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app. The code is CHECKTHEMIC. $50 instantly when you play the $5. And you don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's all guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game.
I feel like the Jaden Daniels injury yesterday was a perfect reason for that policy, right? Jaden Daniels would have absolutely cooked that Carolina Panthers defense and would have gone more than his line. So I would have got a win there. But they're like, no, you get it back. He stays alive because he got injured.
Shout out to all the Lions fans, by the way. I think they're they're just cooking. They're just so excited right now for their team the last couple of years. And then we're at that point where we're gonna start looking for Super Bowl tickets, flights to the Super Bowl, and I swear the flights go up on Mondays after Lions wins.
After Lions games.
It's always the case. All right, let's get to the 4 o'clock games here. Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers. It's 28-18. Chiefs move to 6-0. Niners fall to 3-4. Kansas City, the last remaining undefeated team in the NFL. Ugly game offensively for both teams for quite a bit of this game.
What an absolutely insane game. I mean, just the way it started, right? Like 4th and 1, fake punt that gets stuffed again, like the Vikings game.
By the Chiefs,
Purdy interception. Kalia Davis then tips and then intercepts the ball to himself. Just a crazy start, back and forth with neither team like taking advantage of having the ball.
The QB passing stat lines are hilarious, actually. Mahomes 16 of 27 for 154, no touchdowns, 2 picks, passer rating of 44.4. Brock Purdy's was even worse, 17 of 31 for 212, no touchdowns, 3 picks, 36.7 passer rating. I know Purdy also had 2 touchdowns on the ground. Mahomes had a touchdown on the ground, and probably the play of the game, the 33-yarder along the sideline, which was huge. So a lot of the advanced metrics will save Mahomes on those ones because those rushing yards are valuable. Did it to set up the touchdown that essentially sealed the deal for Kansas City.
Mahomes on the season now has a stat line that looks like Deshaun Watson. He's got 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Like,
passer rating of like 81 or something like that. I mean, it's an awful stat line.
It's terrible.
I just want, like, people, you can't start, like, I'm not going to talk MVPs here, but it's pretty bad. So he's 39-year-old Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
This
so
is a good one.
There you go.
Read it.
No, you read it because I can't remember how.
Patrick Mahomes and Peyton Manning in 2015.
Remember, that's broken Peyton Manning at the end of his career in the last season where he couldn't really play anymore.
Only QBs in the last 30 years to throw more interceptions and touchdowns while leading their teams to a 6-0 start. 39-year-old Manning had 7 passing touchdowns and 10 interceptions. I think 4 came against the Chiefs there. And his 6-0 start in 2015, those came later, actually.
Yeah.
A season that ended in a Super Bowl 50 victory. I mean, the last couple of years, this has kind of been true, but the Chiefs are a defense-first team.
Yes.
A pounds-the-rock type of team. Mahomes did play better in the playoffs, but this offense was this inconsistent last year as well. Last year was a little bit more, I think, his receivers letting him down. This year, it's just they're not great offensively. There was 2 big swings for both teams in this game before. So Brock Purdy, probably his best throw of the game was to Brandon Ayuk on a 3rd down. They couldn't get anything going. Ayuk dropped it. Eventually gets his ACL blown out, most likely, later in the game.
And so that was on 3rd down.
And then next play.
The very next play was a big punt return to get Kansas City to the 49ers 30-yard line.
So that was one of those swings in a game that was massive in Kansas City's favor. And then it worked the other way for Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes has Xavier Worthy for the whole, like, we're going to take our play action shot. You max protect.
From the slot, deep route from the slot. Can't cover it.
He's wide open. This should have been a 75-yard touchdown or wherever he was from.
And he can't overthrow a 4.2 140.
But he did.
Turns out you can.
So Mahomes overthrows Worthy for what should have been a 75-yard touchdown. 2 plays later, Xavier Worthy falls down on the route, and there's an interception. That would be the play. Like the first series of plays, you would say if the Chiefs win, Ayuk drop, Hardman punt return, which set up a Kansas City score and was huge. And if the Niners were to pull this off, it would have been looking back at Mahomes misses this touchdown that's wide open, and then the Niners come back with the interception a couple plays later.
I wonder, like, was Mahomes sort of inwardly cursing his own arm strength on that play? Because that was one you rarely see Mahomes like genuinely. You genuinely don't see him put everything into the throw the way Ryan Fitzpatrick did on every single pass attempt, right? Like every throw Ryan Fitzpatrick ever attempted looked like he was trying to throw the ball through a building, right? Like through the concrete. Mahomes rarely does that. But this was one where he was like, 4-2-1 is free behind the defense. I've got to unload it. And like launched everything he had into it and airmailed it, like put it 3-4 yards beyond him. Was like, damn it. Damn my,
But
curse my howitzer of an arm.
It shows the fine line, though, because that was the one he hit in stride against the Chargers a few weeks ago. Remember, their offense was just as bad against the Chargers back in week 3 or 4, whatever that was, but he hit the one, right? He hit this one in that game. This game, the offense was just as inconsistent, and he missed it. And look, it didn't matter because the Chiefs ended up pulling away in the end because their defense just absolutely cracked down on Purdy and the Niners.
Yeah, the other massive, I mean, not sequence of plays, but 2 other massive individual plays. One you've already mentioned, Mahomes with that ridiculous run down the sideline where a linebacker just completely overruns it, lets him cut back and scamper for additional yardage down the sideline. That was an absolutely ridiculous play. I initially thought that he'd pulled like the Kenny Pickett thing, the fake slide, and no, I'm going to keep going. I honestly think 53 just played it absolutely horrendously. D. Winters.
Yeah.
Like, I think he just had an inexcusable defensive play. Like, Fred Warner kind of gets not stiff-armed, but just sort of can't make the tackle. Mahomes beats him. But he then just like slowly cuts upfield, and Winters just runs off the field.
Part of this, though, is defenders are so cautious now along the sideline.
But you could be cautious and just shepherd him off the field. Like, just line inside.
Yeah, he did over-pursue pretty badly.
Show him off the field and be cautious.
Pretty
Don't hit
impressive
him.
start-stop ability from Mahomes. He hasn't looked that athletic relative to his previous years this year, but that was a good one. His scrambling has been outstanding again, though.
And then there was a couple of plays later where they failed on the 3rd down, and he just decided to truck Malik Mustafa at the goal line, going in for the touchdown. But he was
already in the end zone anyway.
Whatever. He trucked the dude.
Mustafa has some monster hits, too.
Yeah, and he got absolutely flattened by Mahomes in that play. And then the other massive high-leverage play was the 49ers actually had a drive going down in the red zone, and George Karlaftis wins, gets a hit on Purdy as he's throwing the ball, hit as he threw, interception, and that's a turnover in a critical situation for them.
Now, the Niners, we knew they were already down Christian McCaffrey. Deebo Samuel was sick.
Yep.
Tried to play. How many snaps did he end up with? A couple? Like, Deebo Samuel ends up just left. He was so he was sick. Ayuk gets knocked out with the ACL. I mean, and Jawan Jennings was already not playing.
Right.
So they were down to rookie Jacob Cowing. Ricky Pearsall makes his NFL debut. Remember, he was just shot the weekend of opening. Was it opening weekend? Or just before that? Just a few months ago or 2 months ago. So it was good to see Pearsall out there.
Yep.
But it was George Kittle and then like Ronnie Bell and just all the Chris Conley. They're throwing jump balls to Chris Conley. Like, when you're in that part of the playbook, it is rough for the Niners' depth.
Yeah, because Ayuk gets an
after Ayuk got hurt. Yes,
right. Which I don't think we mentioned that.
I just did 3 times.
Oh, nice.
I mentioned it, but I didn't get into if you want to talk about the play specifically, I just touched on, hey, Brandon Ayuk probably tore his ACL here.
Yes. So that's what they were saying. The initial sort of Twitter doctor people were like, yeah, it's or MCL or LCL, whichever, one of those ones, and some other potential things. And the 49ers, Shanahan, I think after the game invoked, we think it might be an ACL, but he'll have tests. Generally, I think if a coach is saying we think it's probably an ACL, it's probably an ACL. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you test with, movement of the knee, and it's moving in a way that it doesn't move if your ACL is intact. We'll get it confirmed by the scan the next morning. He's probably done for the year. So all of a sudden, they need Ricky Pearsall to actually have a huge role in that offense in a way. So he led the team yesterday in receiving snaps, but it only resulted in 5 targets, 3 catches, 21 yards, and 1 first down. They now need him to take up a huge amount of slack, or guys to get back healthy quickly, like Deebo not to be sick, Jennings to be back, that kind of thing.
Dan Pasuta of the 33rd team here had an observation that I agreed with. He said yesterday at the beginning of the game, 49ers have used play action less this year, but it feels like every time they've tried to go back to it this game, the Chiefs have blown it up in some way. I mean, early on, the Niners were looking at shot play after shot play after shot play, and it just wasn't there. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. It does feel like they've put a little bit more on Purdy's plate this year. It is less deception and play action. They still have their good passing concepts, but Purdy's throwing the ball down the field more than ever. Now he's got fewer dudes to throw to down the field with Ayuk out. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. I also mentioned this last night on the show. Purdy had 4 interceptions against the Ravens on Christmas night, and I thought some of those were fluky. I thought he played better in that game where, again, everybody makes the declarative statement, see, Purdy's overrated, he's a system guy, blah, 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 blah. And it was like, well, the Ravens tipped 3 passes. And they all landed in their hands.
Yeah.
This was, after we'd been talking up Purdy for a while, this was one of Purdy's worst games.
Yeah.
Now, the context there is you're missing like your top 4 receivers.
Right.
Like that has to be factored in here, right? We give those passes when we've said this about Mahomes all last year and everything, right? So you give that pass. At the same time, you're about to be a $60 million quarterback in a year. You need to show that you can overcome those things. On top of all that, you talk about the Shanahan scheme and who's got answers and everything. The Spags have answers here because, man, that dude is cooking these last couple of years.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it time we start to give Spags the kind of credit that we've been giving Flores in terms of having answers to the Shanahan defense?
I think Spags has answers to everybody. I mean, every
but
single
specifically,
week,
he's now 4-0 against Shanahan.
No, I get it. Yeah. No, I think Spags is – look, I think we've got this vision in our head. Flores didn't invent putting like 7 up on the line of scrimmage and creating havoc. He's just probably doing it more than others. But Hafley just did it with the Packers. The Chiefs do it quite a bit. And we mentioned on the preview show here, the Chiefs' secret sauce defensively is saying you're not going to hit the easy stuff. You're going to have to hit these low percentage passes down the field, which Purdy's best throw, as I mentioned, was downfield on the hands of Brandon Ayuk, and he dropped it. If you don't hit those, if you don't connect on those, you're screwed because there's not going to be a whole lot of easy. It's going to be a whole lot of low percentage stuff. And Spags does that against every offense extremely well. And he just has that way of dialing up the key pressure at the right time, seemingly every week, in key situations. So I think he's been doing a great job. This Chiefs defense, outstanding once again, cracking down, making huge plays.
4-0 against Kyle Shanahan, 2-0 against McDaniel last year in the Dolphins. Didn't play Houston last year, so we didn't get to see him against Bobby Slowick, but last 6 games against the Shanahan offense, he's won every one of them. Now, part of that is he's on the Chiefs and they have Patrick Mahomes and they win most games they play in. But those are 2 good teams that they've got an unblemished record against in the last 6 games.
Yeah, it's just, once again, it does feel like teams just continue to make key mistakes, that you can't make if you're going to upset the team. I know the Niners were favored, but to me it's all an upset anytime you beat the Chiefs right now. On one hand, Mahomes has by far the worst stats of his career, and can that get better? On the other hand, like they're 6-0 despite that. I mean, it depends on how you're looking at this, but Chiefs offense still has room to get way better at this point, and they're still sitting here at 6-0, and they've already handled a lot of the tougher teams on the schedule.
Yeah.
So 6-0, they going to go undefeated? Undefeated talk. Time to start it. Chiefs. Got the Raiders next week. They'll be 7-0. Anything else on this one?
No. The Chiefs are obviously in a great situation. The 49ers are now under 500, 3-4. Like,
it's just a game back of Seattle.
Yeah.
4-3.
They're not in trouble, but they almost feel like the team that everyone's going to start to forget about because they, instead of being the unstoppable NFC juggernaut and, top seed, et cetera,
exploding whale?
No, not even that. They're going to stumble their way into the playoffs with this backdoor, under 500 for a lot of the season. And everyone's sort of going to sleep on them. And then actually you're going to remember at some point, this is a team capable of beating any team in the league.
It's one of my favorite parts of the season. We get right around Thanksgiving into December. And every week, it's usually Rich Eisen declares, this is the team you don't want to see in January. Rich Eisen's really good at making a weekly declaration of this is the team you don't want to see. Like last year it was Cincinnati, then it was Buffalo, then it was the Packers. It's just every week there's a new team. The Niners are going to be the team that at some point we're going to say you don't want to see them in January.
Like whoever you are hosting a divisional game, in the playoffs after the wild card week, you do not want San Francisco to be the team that's coming to your building. I would suspect, regardless of how they get there, regardless of what it looks like. This team will be dangerous if and when they make the playoffs, even with the way they've struggled.
All right, Carolina Panthers at the Washington Commanders. Commanders 40-7. Monster day from Jaden. Wait a second. Jaden got hurt. Marcus Mariota comes in.
Yeah.
Commanders win 40-7.
Yes.
Dominant outing. It all started with Andy Dalton hitting Dante Fowler with a pick six. Fowler plays for the Commanders.
Yeah.
Not the Panthers.
It's not great.
Commanders were up 7-0 pretty early. There was a point in the game where I thought I made a little funny tweet. I mean, Jaden Daniels comes out with a rib injury. Talk about that in a second. Marcus Mariota comes in, and Jaden Daniels finishes 2 for 2 for 6 yards. He had 3 rushes for 50 yards as well.
Yeah.
But he's got 6 passing yards. Mariota starts 0 for 3, 0 yards, obviously.
Yes.
And the Commanders were up 20-0.
Yeah.
At that point. Then Mariota started cooking. After that point, after that tweet, he goes 18 for 20 for 205 and 2 touchdowns. We got just a couple number 2 picks, Marcus Mariota and Jaden Daniels on the team here.
Yeah. So obviously the Panthers basically just threw this game away immediately.
Literally.
Yeah, like the first one was ridiculous. He just lobbed it to Fowler instead of the screen guy. It was a touchdown. Then the second one looked like a miscommunication interception, but obviously bad, the result. And the game is basically already done at that stage. Like, Washington is ahead. Now, glimmer of life, maybe. Look, Jaden Daniels is out. We don't have to contend with that. And honestly, if Daniels had been in there, I think they would have put up an absurd score on this Panthers team that basically just quit at that point. Daniels going out, you're like, oh, maybe there's a glimmer of hope. But no, they still end up getting it done. And the biggest sort of concern from a Panthers point of view and positive, I guess, from Washington's point of view is that their defense stopped Carolina for the entirety of the game, really. And they've had a couple of games now where the defense has actually stood up in a way we didn't really think they were capable of.
I think so. I made my picks in the Sleeper app. I made them late. Didn't do it before I actually missed my Thursday night game. Forgot to put it in time, so I lost it. So I put my picks in quickly the other day, and they might not match what I said on the show.
I see.
So I think I took Washington in the app, but on the show I said Carolina. When I was talking through it on the show, I was like, well, Carolina's going to – we've seen Andy Dalton put up some points and get the ball to some of these playmakers and make the offense look much better at times this year compared to what it did with Bryce Young. They're going to hang in a shootout. This Washington defense is awful. And, boy, I missed that.
Yeah.
Because, again, it started with the Fowler pick six. Carolina just couldn't get anything going. Commanders' defense definitely played the best they've played maybe all season. And then, you start to see, like, how impressive Jaden Daniels was. But this was literally the best Marcus Mariota's looked in, like, 8 years. I mean, seriously, he looked really good, too. I mean, every single week – we need a montage of me raving about the offense that played the Panthers every single week. I'm like, the Falcons have figured it out. The Bengals have figured it out. Every single week, I'm just going to do it. But here I am, Marcus Mariota. Is he the next reclamation project? Look at this. 18 of 23 for 205. Running around, making plays outside the pocket.
Yeah. I mean, we said it a couple of weeks ago.
Maybe
right?
It's just the Panthers.
Yeah. We said it a couple of weeks ago that when Charles Harris is your number one edge rusher in terms of pressure, things are not in a good situation for you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened again in this game. Like, they just don't have the defense or the offense or anything, really.
Curious how many players Eric is going to try to trade to the Chiefs as the Panthers fall out of contention here.
All of them.
Eric going to trade Deontay Johnson to them. Who's he going to trade to them?
Does he have the ear of Dan Morgan?
I don't know yet.
What was it?
You just have to put it analytically. You just have to, present it well. Hey,
I forget.
Chiefs
What was it
could
Joe
use-
Shane called Dan Morgan? It was something like some obnoxious nickname.
can't.
I can't remember, but it was something ridiculous, like DM or D something crazy.
DM.
It wasn't good.
Panthers pass rush watch. Charles Harris he had a nice sack in the game.
Yeah.
Good sack. 2 pressures.
Right.
Marquise Haynes, 18 rushes, 1 pressure. Deshaun Williams. I won't quiz you on who that is.
Right. I mean, these are
17 pass rushes, 1 pressure.
Yeah. This is a problematic group of pass rushers.
And then 4 other 4 other players with at least 10 rushes and 0 pressures, including Shai Tuttle, who is still 0 for on the season.
Whew.
All right, that's it.
But the problem with that is, obviously, it has a knock-on effect with coverage. Like J.C. Horn is capable of holding up on an island. Nobody else in the secondary is for Carolina. So they just get lit up.
Yeah. So Jaden Daniels hurts his ribs. His mom tweeted out that he's okay.
Yeah.
Like something like, he's okay, LOL. I hope he comes back next week. They play the Bears next week. It got flexed into the 425 window. Remember 2 years ago? These teams have played the last 2 seasons on Amazon Prime Thursday Night Football. A couple of years ago, it was like 12-7. That was like one of the first Al's gonna, retire on the spot games. It is amazing where these 2 franchises have come because they played, I think the Bears, it was more exciting last year, but 2 years ago, it was awful. And now they're getting flexed into the 425 window. We have Caleb Williams playing the best football of his young career so far. We have Jaden Daniels looking like one of the best rookie quarterbacks in a long time, and they're supposed to go head-to-head. So I hope Jaden Daniels can come back for this. I don't know if he could have come back into the game yesterday. He was in street clothes pretty quickly, but it was like, again, it was 20-0, and the offense hadn't even had to do much yet. So Ms. Jackson says he's fine. Hashtag HTTC.
It was crazy early in the game, though. Like, I don't think that it shut him down if he could have come back in. I think he would have come back in.
It was really early.
Like, I know they were up big, but it was so early in the game that you couldn't have been like, all right, this one's in the bag. Let's put the guy on ice.
I hope it's not a multi-week thing, though.
Yeah, I mean, that game obviously loses a hell of a lot of luster if Jaden Daniels isn't in it.
I mean, Mariota. Feeling it right now.
Yeah.
Mariota's cooking. Let Mariota cook. Mariota and Jameis playing ball again this weekend. Maybe they might both be starting next week. Who knows? Anything else on this one? It was 40-7.
No, except, I mean, I was going to say, we said going into that game, right, it was a different type of test for Jaden Daniels. Could he just go out there and beat the crap out of a team that they're much better than they expected to? Now, Daniels didn't.
Commanders did.
Because he only accounted for like 56 yards or whatever before he got hurt. But the team did. Like the Commanders answered that call and absolutely murdered a terrible Panthers team. That, you can't give Daniels credit for that necessarily, but that's a huge thing for Washington.
Yeah, for sure.
They had a totally different type of test. They weren't going up against a really good team. They were going up against a team they were supposed to beat down, and they did, even with their young quarterback who has been lauded probably accurately as the catalyst for everything good that's happening for them right now. That guy went out of the game early, and they could have let that, okay, they were up big, but that easily, one bad Mariota drive, heads could have dropped. They could have let that slip away from them, and instead they went, nope, we're going to keep the foot on the throat, and actually Mariota is going to be inspired to be great again.
Really quick, Commanders looking really good. They're 5-2. They got the Bears this week. Some of the games that are, I think, going to be awesome to watch. They haven't played the Eagles or Cowboys yet. The 2 matchups with the Eagles and for whatever the Cowboys are this year, I can't wait to see those matchups this year. They play Dallas on Thanksgiving, maybe? Is it? No, it's not Thanksgiving. It's a Sunday. And they also have the Steelers in a couple weeks as well. So some fun matchups for Washington coming up here. Starting with the Bears this week. Hopefully we get Jaden Daniels. Let's go Rams and Raiders before we get to the Sunday night football game. Rams 20, Raiders 15. Rams move to 2-4. Raiders fall to 2-5. Discuss.
Another crazy game, only without the high expectations. It was a little bit like the 49ers Chiefs, except it's not between 2 contenders, just against 2 sort of fairly bad teams for different reasons, struggling through the season with turnovers and crazy high leverage plays and injuries and everything all folded into one.
As I said yesterday, the 2 best quarterbacks in the 4 o'clock window both got injured early, Jaden Daniels and Aiden O'Connell. O'Connell, broken thumb. Looks like he's going to miss some time. Gardner Minshew came in to replace him. Goes 50. Man, you just never know what you're going to get from Minshew. 15 of 34 for 154, 3 picks in there.
Yeah. Jordan Rodriguez had a tweet that said, Kobe Durant's first half. Pass breakup on 3rd down that held the Raiders to a field goal. Then an interception that set up a touchdown. And then a strip sack on a blitz that was scooped for a touchdown by Cameron Curl. So Cameron Curl and Kobe Durant both had monster games for the Rams defense.
Curl had the Raiders ended up with 5 field goals in this game as well. It was 20-12. The Rams missed a field goal that would have put them up 2 scores. And all of a sudden, the Raiders still have life. They drive all the way down, and it was Quentin Lake and Cam Curl, again, with 2 big plays back-to-back that essentially forced the Raiders into field goal number 5 to make it 20-15. And that was it on the scoring. So Rams offense, they really struggled because, one of the touchdowns for the Rams, Kyron Williams finds the end zone on a 13-yard score, but it's also that strip sack for a touchdown. That was pretty much it. Kyron Williams finds the end zone again later, but Rams struggled to move the ball consistently, had the defensive touchdown that essentially ends up the difference in the game.
Kyron Williams keeps his touchdown streak alive, which is up there. I think he tied Priest Holmes or moved one step ahead of Priest Holmes? But like the only running backs ahead of him on this consecutive touchdown streak are like LaDainian Tomlinson and some other Hall of Famer.
He's pretty good.
Yeah.
He's been good. Pedestrian outing again for Stafford, when we talk about the injuries, and Sam, I think we said this the last couple of years, there's been a bunch, but they are coming in bunches to position groups and everything, right? I mean, the fact it's still a struggle for the Rams with no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, Tyler Johnson's making a few plays here and there, but it's tough to get the dependability of Tyler Johnson, Tutu Atwell, Colby Parkinson, Demarcus Robinson, like every single week and having an effective pass game.
And Parkinson, for some reason, was basically sitting on the sideline for most of this game. Like the 3 leaders in terms of receiving snaps for the Rams were Tyler Johnson, Demarcus Robinson, and Tutu Atwell. Like that shouldn't be functioning as a passing game.
And as I mentioned, old friend Austin Gale is going to move on from depressing Deshaun Watson tweets to depressing Raiders tweets. So what did I have here? I didn't give it to our production crew, but Raiders running backs are averaging minus 0.37 EPA per rush. That's the second lowest mark for any team in weeks 1 through 7 since at least 2000.
Alexander Madison had a solid game.
Yeah, it's better than it was. I mean, it's because it started out like the fact that they're at minus 0.37 EPA per play, like it was closer to half a point. It was 0.5
I just
the first
love
few weeks.
When we were at Circa Sportsbook before the season, and we were looking at all the the available projections and bets and sort of awards things. Zamir White was like, what was he, 5th, 3rd, something ridiculous.
He had the 5th best. Did you say best or lowest?
He was the 5th most likely person apparently to lead the league in rushing this year. That there were 2 sort of lines that stood out as insane. That one was one of them. We were both like, what? And then the other one was Derrick Henry was in the same ballpark. Like Derrick Henry was like 4th maybe, or no. Derrick Henry might have been lower than Zamir White.
I think but you understand why, because the theory was that Derrick Henry's going to share some rushing yards with the Ravens, the way they play.
Right. But
and
I was
Zamir White's going to be like the bell cow for the Raiders? Maybe?
There were 2 things that stood out as crazy. The optimism that the Lions had that Zamir White was going to have a good season, and the pessimism that they had that Derrick Henry could lead the league in rushing, only one of which is really actionable, right? Like the clear bet to be had there is, well, I'm going to go put money on Derrick Henry leading the league in rushing. You can't really put money on Zamir White not, which I would have done if that was an option. But both those things are looking reasonably good at this point.
Brock Bowers remains really good.
Yes.
Is he leading the league in catches yet?
2 rookies. Brock Bowers looked amazing, and Jared Verse continues to look really good for the Rams.
Yes, he definitely does. Really quick, I'm trying to see where Brock Bowers is with in tight ends. So Brock Bowers has 47 catches, 13 more than any other tight end in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
What's his pace? A million? It's a good pace.
Yeah.
He has 477 receiving yards. That's 102 yards more than any other tight end as well, and 23 first downs plus touchdowns, 4 more than anyone else in the league. George Kittle second in all of those categories. So Brock Bowers already looks outstanding. That'll be a nice piece for next year's starting quarterback for the Raiders.
Yeah.
To throw to.
Absolutely.
I got no more use for this game.
Done.
Let's go Sunday Night Football. Something's happening. Bottles flying. Someone being attacked over there. Just yell if you need help.
Sunday Night Football.
37-15. Steelers over the Jets. At one point, this game was 15-6. 15-6 Jets, actually. Yep. Jets were in control, 15-6. And then the Steelers scored the next 31 points.
Yeah. They
37-15. I mean, it's very clear. Russ is back, and the Steelers have a Hall of Fame quarterback back on the team, and Aaron Rodgers is cooked, and there's really nothing else to say about this game. That's the only thing that happened. Russ is back, and the Steelers are way better for it, and Aaron Rodgers is horrible, and the Jets are worse for having him.
Huh. Okay.
That's what I'm hearing. That's what everybody's talking about.
Okay. Cool.
What's the reality here?
So, yeah, this game, I honestly believe, completely swung off a ridiculous play by rookie Beanie Bishop. As you said, the Jets were up 15-6. Everything was kind of going their way. They'd had success. They had the classic, sometimes when luck is bouncing your way, like it just freakish things happen and bail you out. They thought they'd scored a touchdown on the ground. Jeff Ulbrich wanted to challenge it. They didn't give it. Jeff Ulbrich wanted to challenge it, fumbled the challenge flag. Right?
That was the funniest thing.
And by the time he got the flag off the ground and tossed it on the field, the Jets had run a play and scored on the play. And I don't know if they'd have given them that touchdown if he'd gotten the successful challenge flag. So they were sort of saved from a challenge that might not have gone their way and ended up getting a touchdown instead. Then Pittsburgh blocks a point after attempt. They call leverage on Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Wrong.
Terrible call.
Bad call.
Right. Number one, I don't think he touched an offensive player. I think it was all the only guy he touched was his own player. He touched, if he used his hand at all to propel him forward, and I don't think he really did.
It glanced Watt's helmet.
It was TJ Watt's helmet. So It's not leverage, whatever it is. Anyway, that call, obviously, if you take the penalty, you can move a yard closer, attempt a 2-point conversion. They got the 2 points, so they're up 15-6. Now the Jets have the ball again. They're driving, and Beanie Bishop makes an utterly ridiculous play where he's opened his hips to the right. The route is coming in behind him to Garrett Wilson, and he turns, flips his hips, and makes a ridiculous snag on an interception for Rodgers. Completely changes. So that's like shortly before halftime. It completely changes, obviously, who could get the score before halftime. And really the game, momentum-wise, completely swung from that point. I don't even think that was a bad Rodgers throw. From the way he's looking at that and the way Beanie is opened up to the other side, he, I think, is perfectly within his rights to think he cannot make this play where I'm throwing this ball. And he did.
It was a great play by Beanie Bishop, undrafted free agent out of West Virginia for Pittsburgh. Kind of stepped into the slot role this year. Had some ups and downs so far, but outstanding game. Then he had the interception later. I just want to talk about the narrative stuff really quick.
Or do you want to wait? Cooked and Russ is great.
It's just funny. Can we just watch? We all watch the games, and the same people that were making jokes about Russ and he's terrible and they never should have gone to him and put Fields back in. And I joked, where's Arch Manning? Is he going to come replace him? Because it started slow. Fans were getting a little restless with Russell Wilson. And so you go from the guy was bouncing bubble screens and the offense wasn't doing anything. And then all of a sudden he's underthrowing deep balls that George Pickens happens to be catching. And it's whoa, Russ has been back this whole time. He's great. He's great. He underthrew George Pickens twice. One where George Pickens is being held, has to stop for the pass, and he one-hands it for a long 51-yarder or whatever it was. And then the other one where George Pickens has 2 steps on the corner, it hits the cornerback, the underthrow, and Pickens still manages to catch it. This isn't Russ is back. Russ is back. Look at this. Look at Russ doing all the work. Russ is back. It's all George Pickens.
Yeah.
On these plays.
Pickens was insane.
Even the touchdown to Pickens, slight underthrow. You could have just let him out, and George Pickens comes back and snatches it and looks great. So let's just add some context to this whole thing. Okay. Russ is back because George Pickens made these incredible catches. And then Rodgers, the thing that switched the narrative on everybody here was George Pickens is saving Russell Wilson on these passes, turning them into completions. And then Rodgers makes maybe the best throw of the game by any quarterback, puts the ball on Garrett Wilson in between coverage. I think it snuck through there. I don't think Beanie Bishop got a finger on it.
No.
Garrett Wilson is surprised. Now, maybe Rodgers forced it. Maybe he shouldn't have thrown it. Maybe it was the wrong read. I don't know. But he created what should have been a completion into a tight window that wasn't even open. And it bounces off Garrett Wilson, lands in Beanie Bishop's hands. He gets his second interception. And all of a sudden, Aaron Rodgers, turnover machine, man. You know, he's terrible. Like, it's just funny that the whole – and look, I want to add more context to this on the other side. But, like, literally, like, 3 or 4 throws have people saying, Russell Wilson's the back, and he's awesome, and the whole offense is better. And Aaron Rodgers is cooked because Garrett Wilson couldn't catch the ball, and it became an interception. And those were the biggest plays in the game that swung in favor of the Steelers.
Yeah. Those 2 plays, I think, completely changed this game. The first interception to Beanie Bishop, which I think is just a genuinely absurd defensive play, where, again, I don't even think that's a bad throw by Rodgers. I think he is absolutely correct, both in terms of the read and even the location is fine. He simply does not believe that Bishop can make that play. And I think he's right to assume that from the picture he looks at when he releases that ball. I think it's entirely a correct decision to say, I put it here, I have a catch. There's no way he's able to make that turn and catch the ball. And Bishop just makes a phenomenal defensive play. And then the play you're talking about where he hit his receiver. He put the ball into a tight window, got it there, and Garrett Wilson lets it clang off his shoulder and turns it into an interception instead. Those are 2 monster turnover plays that go against the Jets in a game where they had been the better team up until that swing.
Now, so that, like, that's the extreme of it. I think Russ had a little bit of luck on his end, and Rodgers had a little bit of bad luck on his end. Let me pull this back to the center just a little bit.
Pull it back.
When Russ was named the starter,
yep,
you and I came out here and boldly proclaimed,
meh,
we have no strong take.
Right.
We're sitting on the fence. And my initial reaction was, okay, Russ isn't going to do the same running that Justin Fields does, but he can unlock the downfield passing attack. And I know our former boss, Chris, was out there, he said moon ball about 15 times.
He was so happy that he got to talk about
the moon ball again. He was very excited. He enjoys the moon ball. And there's truth to that, right? He throws the ball at a different angle that allows his receivers to make plays. But, like, let's be serious here. There's a difference between the Russell Wilson old school deep ball that he's just dropping beautifully into DK Metcalf's hands.
Right.
There's a difference between that one and then, yes, you put a little more air under it and then George Pickens can go do his work. But the result is very much luck driven. But I will say this. Russell Wilson will give George Pickens the opportunity to shine.
Yeah.
And he did that last night. He gave Pat Freiermuth. I thought the Freiermuth one that got one-handed was a pretty good throw. I thought that was a nice throw by Russ. He will give those receivers opportunities to shine. So if you want to give Russ credit, his willingness to give Freiermuth and George Pickens in particular the ability to create those big plays, absolutely. I completely agree. And that's what gives the Steelers the higher end potential offensively. Now, if Russ makes those same exact throws next week, they might fall incomplete. They might not get caught this time.
So I think you can say that George Pickens is probably the best contested catch receiver in today's NFL. I think you could make that case about Nuke Hopkins. There's a couple other players in the conversation. But let's say, for the sake of argument, George Pickens is the best contested catch receiver in today's NFL. Do you know what his career contested catch rate is?
46%.
Correct. It is under 50%, right? So I don't know if it's 46 or it's in the 40s. So you're taking the best contested catch guy in the NFL for his career is coming up with less than 50% of those, right? That's the problem with that as a concept. Whether it's Keon Coleman, whether it's George Pickens, yes, you can have games where Pickens does crazy things, unlocks, has a bunch of big plays because he's able to make those catches. And it's like, wow, look at this. This is phenomenal. And yeah, that's something you can lean into more. But if there's nothing else there, like if that's the offense, it is by definition a coin flip, whether it's going to come good in a given game, right? And sometimes the coin flip's going to come up heads 5 times in a row, and great, we win. Sometimes it's going to be 50-50. Sometimes you're going to catch 5 tails in a row and you're going to have no passing offense, right? So that's the risk with that type of offense.
The ceiling's higher, though.
Yeah.
Russ is going to raise the ceiling of the offense, but if he plays the same way he did last night, there will be games where those don't work that way.
Yeah, and
they score 15.
This is why I didn't understand the sort of universal decrying of that move. Well, what's the point in going to Russell Wilson? Like, this is a bad decision. It's going to make them worse. Well, not necessarily. I mean, sure, you're going to lose some plays where Russell Wilson isn't able to do what Justin Fields does. Now, by the way, there were several plays in this game where the offensive line crapped itself and Russell Wilson was able to get out of quick pressure and make something happen. Now, was he able to do what Justin Fields is able to do and like get out of it and then turn it into a crazy scramble play? And you're like, wow, look at Fields. No, but he got away from the initial pressure, which is the problem, right? The play where Broderick Jones just like falls over, right? And remember, like last week it went viral. There was a play where Broderick Jones, instead of dropping into a pass set, like took a step forward in an inexplicable manner that I assume must have been some kind of mental goof where he thought it was a run play or a screen or something. And immediately the quarterback is getting rushed by a free pass rusher on the edge. And everyone is like, Russell Wilson isn't able to make this play because Fields escapes that, turns it into a positive scramble. There were plays similar to that last night where Russell Wilson got away from the first guy and found a dump off or found something positive that wasn't a sack. So that part of the argument is kind of already dead, right? He is actually able to save you from some of those plays. And then, what you lose in Fields' crazy rushing ability, you gain back in the fact that Russell Wilson is willing to attempt passes that Justin Fields is not.
Yeah.
And maybe those passes rely on some luck or some George Pickens freakery at the other end, but it's the attempt that's important, right? It's the different dynamic of that aggression. And Chris was making this point that, Mina Kimes was saying it makes the run game worse because of what Fields loses, what you lose by Fields not being on the field. But the point Chris was making on the broadcast is, but you actually open it up by suddenly having a more threatening passing game. Now everybody's got to back off. You can't crowd the line of scrimmage, and it actually enhances your run game, even though the quarterback is less of a rushing threat.
Run game, which was good again, and even when they scored the last touchdown to make it 37 and really pile it on, I mean, they moved everybody.
So I still end up,
attack.
I come back essentially to the same place, right? Which is, I don't think it's clear-cut either way. I think it's probably quite close, and maybe Russell Wilson gives you a higher ceiling.
The people, and the reason why you and I landed, because we're very reasonable people here, Sam, the reason why we landed in this like middle ground is because I think we understand the context of what I mentioned last week is people feel really good about Justin Fields because the expectations were so low because he played so poorly.
But it's also just because they won games.
And they won, but he was playing better than he was in Chicago because the baseline was so low.
At least initially.
And we remember Russ being a superstar and coming way back down to earth and kind of struggling the last couple of years despite the stats last year in Denver. And so they kind of just worked back toward each other, right? Russ down from stardom and Fields up from a developmental quarterback to where they're both similar quarterbacks right now.
It's more, I mean, I get why a lot of people were making that argument, right? I was surprised by some of the smart people that were making that argument. I guess that's my only point.
Yeah, I get it.
And I think had Fields played the way he did in the first 3 or 4 weeks, I think it would be a much easier argument to make that, hey, Fields should stay in the job. I think the way he played the last 2 weeks, where Wilson was actually starting to get close to coming back, those are the 2 weeks where I think that kind of lost him the job. If he'd continued his level,
those were concerning
from earlier in the season, I think you could say, all right, he's won the job. You can't take him out at this spot. The fact that he did take a step back gave them cover, I think, to say Russell Wilson has always been QB1, and Fields hasn't done enough yet to take that job away from him. I think that's an entirely legitimate approach to take from Mike Tomlin, and I think this game justified it.
All right, one little anecdote, and then I want to talk about the Rodgers thing again and pull that back down to the center as well. Broderick Jones got whooped by Will McDonald multiple times, but in particular for a sack.
Yep.
Remember that whole story around draft time that I think Belichick was telling on the Manning cast, how the Steelers traded up for Broderick Jones, and Belichick was like, yeah, of course I want you to get the tackle, Pittsburgh, instead of the Jets. The Jets wanted Broderick Jones. They were going to put him in at right tackle. They needed a right tackle, and instead they had to settle for Will McDonald. Just thought that was an interesting dynamic. They went head-to-head, and McDonald looked much better, got the better of him, and Broderick Jones looks awful right now.
Not just
Steelers are winning and everything, but Broderick Jones has some of the worst reps of any tackle in the NFL right now. And I can't remember if I already said this on the podcast, but it's like Tebow at tight end type of reps where he just looks lost and bad.
Yeah, not just settle for Will McDonald, but McDonald, remember, was seen as a massive reach at the time. Everyone was hammering that pick as a huge reach for them. McDonald also at this stage is on, I think is he second in the NFL in sacks?
Yeah, he also has a fake 8 sacks.
Right. That was like his third good one.
Yeah.
The rest of them have all been like unblocked or pursuit plays.
And one was literally he didn't do anything, but Will Levis just dropped the ball and he was near him.
Right. Like I saw somebody was like, oh, McDonald's a beast, like to hell with PFF. Because his PFF grade hasn't been particularly good this season. And the reason it hasn't been is because most of his production has been not fake because he made those plays, but the remedial level of difficulty, right? He's been unblocked or there's been a breakdown and he's just been able to run the straight line at the quarterback.
For the 1,000th time, stop using sack totals to determine who's good. But last night, Will McDonald was good.
But this game, he was a genuine beast, right? This was the first game, I think, this year where you're like, okay, if he'd done this every week, he should end up with those stats. He hasn't, and he's ended up with those stats anyway, right? That's the disconnect. But this game was a game that absolutely reflected those season statistics.
All right, let me go back. Let me pull the Rodgers thing back to the center here for a minute here. So I started by saying Rodgers had some bad luck last night, completely changed the narrative. Russ had some good luck last night, completely changed the narrative. Russ, though, deserves credit for putting players in position to succeed. The argument against Rodgers that I would make is this wasn't just one game. We now have a 7-game sample of the Jets have scored 2 points more than they scored last year through 7 games with Zach Wilson at quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers is, maybe has more influence with the Jets. When you look at the Steelers, Mike Tomlin, and Chris was hinting at this last night, Mike Tomlin saying, I need my team. I don't want to have any controversy on my team. I'm going to put Russ in there so that they know, and we're going to make a decision on the starter going forward. Like Mike Tomlin is in full control of that team. So it's probably fair to criticize Rodgers because he brought his friends along. He just brought Devontae in, and you got Alan Lazard there, and Rodgers has a lot of influence, and it's not working out. They're 2-5. The stats are awful on offense. It's a very staticky type offense. We've complained about that for a while. And yes, he made a couple good throws that maybe got unlucky on his end. But the totality of this thing, I think Rodgers probably deserves more blame. And again, if we go back to when Rodgers had more control in Green Bay, things went south. When he started to get coached and Matt LaFleur had more power and Matt LaFleur was more in control, things were much better. And I think that's where Rodgers, this isn't like he's physically cooked and he's done. There's definitely times when he's under pressure, like he's not breaking free from that the way he used to. There's definitely some more physical limitations to Rodgers than there were previously. But this is, if you're going to say Aaron Rodgers is done or whatever you want to say and overreact to, it's the totality of the whole thing. The fact that he got his people in there, it's his offense, it's his buddies, and it's still not working out. And even though physically he can make a lot of good throws, doesn't have it all the same way he did a few years ago.
He doesn't. And he's not the player that he was before injury. I think that is fair to say. I do think, though, that he is good enough to be winning games and that they're quite close, even though this ended up as a massive score in favor of Pittsburgh. They were winning, they were ahead, they were comfortably the better team until those 2 high leverage plays that we talked about.
Yeah.
They also did a lot of good things in the game overall in offense compared with previously. Like, they took TJ Watt out of this game. That's a huge win for this offense. Like, they were going up against one of the best defensive linemen in the game, a true game wrecker, basically eliminated from this game, the way they took him, whether it was the great Morgan Moses or all the help that he got given during the game. Either way, TJ Watt basically wasn't a factor in this. Did you see the way they greeted each other after, by the way?
Who's that?
TJ Watt and Morgan Moses after the game had a little moment, when they all go for handshakes and stuff.
A couple Hall of Famers.
Exactly. They just greeted each other like a couple of titans after a battle. You know?
Yeah.
Like outstanding. Like TJ Watt was like, "What a job you did there, Morgan." Morgan's like, "Yeah, I know."
You had a lot of help.
Right.
Four hands always on me, but
Anyway, so they did that. Devontae Adams made a difference. Like maybe it didn't get reflected in Adams' production, which wasn't off the charts, but like the Devontae Adams arrival massively opened things up for Garrett Wilson. Like he should have had a monster game and would have had a bigger one, but for the ball clanging off his shoulder pads. And he needs to be better for them to be, winning those games. But like the Adams and Garrett Wilson axis, I think, will have a huge impact. It is really hard to cover. Breece Hall had a big game.
Yeah.
The offensive line was better. Like this should have been better than it was, but a couple of freaky plays bounced the game towards Pittsburgh, who, let's remember, have a really good defense.
They do. And
so
I want to remind you, too, I don't want to completely equate these things, but let's bring it up anyway. The Tampa Bay Bucks, the year they won the Super Bowl, traded for Antonio Brown, or signed Antonio Brown, whatever it was. And they were awful the first game they had Antonio Brown.
Right.
Now, they went on to win the Super Bowl. They were already a good team. They're not a 2-5 team. But they went on to win the Super Bowl that year. The next year, the Rams traded for OBJ. Scored 3 points that night, right? We were all, LOL, bad pick. Oh, look at you, stupid Rams. OBJ. It took them a week or two before they figured things out. They go on to win the Super Bowl. Like the high impact receiver doesn't always just step in and make plays. Now, with Amari Cooper, maybe it worked fine for the Bills, but they play in the Titans, right? I mean, they should win that game.
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes time. The other thing I'll say, the Jets have 4 more games against winning teams. They have New England this week, Arizona in a couple weeks, the Colts, Dolphins twice. We'll see what they have a chance to rectify this a little bit. They're just running out of time.
Yeah.
They're 2-5 right now. And again, the totality of this whole thing is they're scoring 18 points per game with Rodgers,
right,
and still a pretty good group of playmakers, presumably.
They're putting themselves in a similar situation to the Bengals, where it's like your margin for error is just running out. But I do think that they're actually quite close and not dead and buried yet. Like this.
You're doing 2020 Romo calling the 7-5 Bucks future Super Bowl champs.
I can just definitely see a scenario where this offense not clicks, but does start to play a lot better and gets a couple of those breaks going their way, and suddenly it's a different team. Now, the problem that they might run into is at the same time that's happening, the defense is getting really banged up. Like they were missing basically an entire secondary. Yeah. By the end of that game, Sauce Gardner got hurt, came back into the game. C.J. Mosley played like 7 snaps. Like most of their important back 7 players were not on the field for a lot of that game, which is, I think, a big part of why it ends up being 37 points for the Steelers. Like suddenly the Jets defense is not the Jets defense, not because it's playing like crap, but because they don't have the Jets, like the starters for the Jets defense are no longer there.
And their run defense has been an issue anyway. And they got run all over. Najee Harris ran really well again in this game, second straight week.
Particularly late on.
Yeah, especially late. I mean, look, I'm workshopping this other whole take where, remember there was times where Peyton Manning was acting like he was the coach? You know what I mean? Like he had so much control. And it felt like it affected the other. To me, it feels like it affected the other side of the ball. Like Peyton runs practice, he doesn't let his backup take any reps, and it might help his own production and his own success, but maybe the totality of the team might not get there until later in his career when he started to give up some of that control to the coach.
You're talking Indy Peyton?
I'm talking Indy Peyton.
Okay.
I feel like he had a lot of control. Rodgers is similar. And now is like Rodgers there was awful special teams in Green Bay, and they're getting all their kicks blocked here, and awful special teams with the Jets. Like, is there something to that compared to like a Brady, and it seems like Mahomes right now are part of a team where the coach is in control, right? They submit themselves to the coach and play within that structure. I mean, I might be overrating some of the stuff, but that's one of those things that always felt like it separated Brady with Rodgers, Brady with maybe Peyton at times, and might separate Mahomes from others here, where Mahomes is the star, but there's probably a reason why they're 6-0 and the rest of the team is good despite Mahomes not playing as well. So it's just a whole nother story. But
This is still it's another game in the year of the blocked kick. I mean, we had two of them in this game, one of which was incorrectly chalked off for leverage. The other one of which was just like four guys plowing right up the middle, getting a hand up. And was it Lowry? Dean Lowry actually ended up blocking it, but like three other guys had their hands right in the same area. What the hell is happening with kicks this year?
I don't know. Bad kicks. Good blocks. Good job by the Steelers special teams. They're 5-2. Do they have another? Oh man, do you know what the Monday night game is next week?
Yeah, we've
Giants Steelers next Monday night.
We've occasionally, I think, referenced this in making light terms, but Kevin Cole, formerly of PFF, runs a thing where he has like an adjusted score right at the end of every game. So you have the score,
this is much closer,
and then you have what the data says the score should have been, right?
What's he got here?
And it's kind of funny because essentially it's like a nerd cliche. We're like, we've actually progressed beyond, yards over expectation and completion rate over expectation. Now we're actually changing the score. So whatever you think happened in the game, the score is completely different if you look at the data, right? So it's kind of a funny concept that I don't think necessarily makes him look great, but it does occasionally tell a story that I'm willing to co-opt for my purposes. So my overall point here has been, I think this game was closer than the score reflects, and the Jets are closer than the score reflects to being good, right?
Tell me about it.
Would you like to know what the Kevin Cole adjusted score was for this game? Remember, actual score, 37-15.
37-15.
Adjusted score.
I got the Jets 21-20.
Come on, have you just seen that?
No.
That's exactly what it is.
No, really?
The Jets 21-20.
I know enough about. I read your tone.
Yeah.
I read your tone. I know enough about Kev Cole and the system to come up. I nailed it.
Why?
What do I get? Where's Prize Picks? Does that count for anything?
You are obnoxiously good at just plucking numbers,
guessing stuff
out of the air,
guessing
and being
stuff.
right.
Very good at it.
Why have we not taken advantage? When we're in Circa, why are we like trying to plot out actual data for what's going to? Why don't you just go in there and guess a random number at odds of 300 to 1?
Not good when there's money on the line.
Okay.
I did hit on 31 though. Just told my team. I told you that story before.
Yeah.
The same McAfee story. Peyton at 18 was me and 31.
Yeah.
So I'm basically Peyton Manning. Good Peyton Manning though, not end of his career Peyton Manning.
Anyway.
But coachable Peyton Manning, not run the whole show Peyton Manning.
So on the one occasion where I'm willing to take that data point as an argument,
21-20.
the Jets should have won this game 21-20.
Can we change the Jets? Jets are 3-4 now. Steelers are 5-3.
3-4. The Devontae Adams trade fixed it. It's working in the right direction. The Jets are contenders again. Mike Greenberg, he's happy. They're going to the Super Bowl.
Let's get Greeny on here. Can we get Greeny for Wednesday? He can't do TV. He's on.
He's already on the. We're competing with him, aren't we? What time does he get off
going
the
head to
air?
head? We compete with Mike T. Do you think Mike T watches us when he's live? Probably watches us.
Not when he's live. I wouldn't have thought.
Instead.
Yeah.
And then just like recites our takes.
Sure.
I'm sure he does. This has been fun. I'm so glad that I guessed that score. I'm so glad.
I can't believe. How did you do that?
Mike T is not watching.
21-20. How?
You just got to read the context. Your tone, Kev Cole, Kev's, he's like, you think this, but let me tell you the opposite that's happening. That's what Kev does, right?
I mean, I get that you would have been in the ballpark and thought it was close and, maybe the Jets edge it. How did you come up with 21-20?
I have no idea. You know what I did? I did the math in my head so it's 37-15, but it was really 30-15, right? So there's garbage time touchdown in there, and I'm thinking the model's probably doing garbage time. There's a couple fluke plays in there, and I assumed that the Jets won, but it's still close, so it just landed at 21-20. And there we are. Jets moved to 2-5 in reality, though.
Yes,
and need to go 8-2,
right,
to get to 10 wins here.
The good news is that now that we're basically finished the show, my sinuses appears to have dried up.
Good.
Like now I could do 2.5 hours with no problems.
Let's go.
For the last 2.5 hours, it's been problematic.
Let's record Wednesday's show.
Yeah, get ahead of it.
Oh, man.
2 more games tonight. Not now.
We have 2 more tonight, and it's late night, and you need ESPN Plus for the second one.
You do.
Yeah. And you need Amazon. What do you need?
Amazon Prime, Netflix.
You need Netflix for
YouTube
Christmas.
TV. The whole shebang.
Ask for Netflix for Christmas. If you
People
don't have
were running this math like before the season. You needed like $850 worth of subscriptions to watch every game this season.
a whole bunch of Just a whole bunch of one week trials.
You could be like Reek Woolen and use the illegal streaming place to watch it.
He's streaming stuff.
Yeah, and tweet
He
about
can't fork over the $300 to
Well,
get.
I think he can. He just
Sunday
doesn't want
ticket.
to. You know, there's like I have some respect for that.
Principles.
Yeah, I refuse to give
You'd be the-
ESPN,
You'd be the billionaire that's like,
the worldwide leader, this money for this
Finding the free
one
stream.
game that I want to watch. Instead, I'm going to illegally stream it.
excited for the doubleheader tonight. This is Jordan Fluke. Oh, man. You haven't seen a Jordan. I'll be sick later this year at some point, and I will play through it.
No, the Jordan Flu game was the Super Bowl from.
Oh, yeah. Go check out our Super Bowl.
Yeah.
No, don't do it. It's on the old channel. Go check out the old channel, too. It's fine. You're at Super Bowl night.
Yeah.
You could barely even sit up straight.
Yes.
And then that was both of us next day.
What turned
flying
out to be COVID, though we didn't know that at the time. I caught a
home. He had
horrible,
it.
horrible
Tyler in the
illness.
booth had it. Gordon
Yeah.
had it.
Which
and we were all
started-
sitting there like this at the.
which started to take hold during the game.
Yeah.
So I'm in the auxiliary press area, scaffolding set up at the Super Bowl. I'm supposed to be like basically sending in live takes of this game, like notes to the editorial team. I don't know, sometime in like the second quarter, I'm like, are you guys able to like just handle this by yourselves while I quietly die here and not focus on anything? They're like, yeah, I got you. Then we have to walk back to the hotel and then record the show live after.
It was great. Long-winded me. I kept trying to prolong the show too.
Yeah.
Like, really.
I was in a bad way in that time. And then, it turns out it was COVID and we all got it and we almost, it was rough. It wasn't good.
Good day.
And it was all Gordon's fault for bringing it over.
Most miserable week of Tyler's life, he says. We all had to get back home too and like tell our spouses like, hey,
Yeah.
I've been gone for a week. But I'm a little under the weather.
But I'm going to spend the next week in bed.
A little under the weather.
See ya.
I'm going to need a nap. It was a long week in Vegas. Sorry. You take care of the kids.
Yeah.
Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code Check the Mic. You get $50 instantly when you play $5. Sam, still alive for your lineup tonight, presumably. So we'll be checking that
Mark
out.
Andrews. We need Mark Andrews to show up.
Doubleheader tonight, and we will react instantly after the games. We have to stay up for after. We might. If it's an exciting Ravens-Bucks game, I think we go live right after that game.
During the second
game, because let's be serious, there's no Cardinals and Chargers fans. No one's going to stay up and listen to us tonight. So just be ready. Be subscribed on YouTube and just be ready. We're going to go live at any time tonight. Whatever we see fit. Okay? So be ready. Appreciate everybody for being here. We'll see you again Wednesday for more. Check the Mic.